the home of Shakespeare, football, and mushy peas. It's a place of happy valleys and friends in the north. It's gritty, outlandish, it's a cracker. If it has a heartbeat, you'll find it here.
I do love the intro. Thanks again to Gary Bolter from Outcast Australia, our small contingent of 4 creatives down under who are veteran members of the Outcast Creative, having participated in many projects with me. And I've had the pleasure of directing Gary 3 times now, I think. So, okay, we're back for part 3 of Our Friends in the North. In fact, I better have the DVD to hand because I always need it. Here we are, and we'll be talking about in depth the last 3 episodes of this spectacular television series, groundbreaking in its day, still holds up well. I'm hoping this might provoke interest in the show and maybe cajole those people who own the rights, probably the BBC, to produce a remastered version on Blu-ray in a 16:9 format, which would be really good. I would love to see that happen. It may not happen. If not, the show is available for you to watch elsewhere. I think you can get it on Apple TV and a couple of other places. But let me bring in my guest co-host, whose channel is already popping. He's already planned all of his streams until the year 3035. And so I'm already booked in to do Karate Kid 20, Aliens. This time it's Potato Man and various other films. I love popping on his channel. He does a lot of stuff with the Uninspired Reviewer, the YouTuber who is 20 with the brain of a 500-year-old. We do love him. It's Dark Hour. Good to see you, man.
What did you say? 2035? I'm booking people up
I
there?
think it's about that, isn't it? It feels like that.
No, so, some people did call me crazy. I decided I was going to set up a 2024 full schedule. I just wanted every movie that I was going to do. That way I can just throw the schedule out there in the beginning of the year, or actually toward the end of this year at this point. And people could just be like, I like all these. And it allows me to, fudge around with it. Like somebody gives me 10 movies, I could give them like 4 or 5 of them and be like, okay, and mix them up and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's a playlist of many of my favorite films.
Oh yeah, a lot of those too. I know. I'm not sure if the one I sent you had the notes on it, but a lot of them are coming up on big anniversaries, 40-year anniversary, 35.
Right.
So
Stop it,
that's kind of my
old.
Yeah, well, that's kind of my go-to. The first thing I do a lot of the time for these kind of streams is I look at like what has a relevant date coming up. It makes it easier for me to pick because like I could just sit there and just pick random movies all day. But if I have like something that kind of guides me and it allows me to like work it out, like sometimes it won't be exact. Like sometimes the anniversary will be at the beginning of the year and I'll put the stream at the end. But for the most part, almost every movie we're doing next year has a pretty big anniversary coming up. So.
Great stuff. Good to see that Taylor Swift greater than Disney Star Wars, which if I put it up in the thing doesn't show properly, but got some kind of
that's always weird that happens.
I know, right? Yeah. Anyway, they put up some kind of waving mermaid type affair.
Person turquoise waving is what it says.
Now I appreciate the turquoise waving person. Taylor Swift greater than Disney Star Wars.
I think everything's greater than Disney Star Wars, to be honest with you.
I had the honor of pre-recording my first stream. It went out live yesterday. I did it with Retro Nerd Girl on her channel. Love doing stuff with her. She's such a lovely person, and we really love a lot of the same movies. And we were doing feel good movies part 2.
I saw that. So I caught a little bit of that.
Yeah, I mean it's such a broad topic, of course, because what makes one feel good to one person will mean something to somebody else. Of course, different things can make you feel good at different times. Did you feel good when you got to the end of the epic story of Our Friends in the North?
Yes and no.
Well, let's get to that when we get to episode
I mean,
9.
I could say this without it being a spoiler. It definitely has a real life feel to it of not everything is really all that great for everybody, but there are good and bad things that are going on. So it does have a real authenticity to its ending. Or,
well, let's what we'll do. Don't let me forget. We'll cover what we think the core message of the piece is, and again, just reminding everybody that this is based on a play. This is part 3. You might have trouble finding part 2 because I'm actually re-editing something out of that in a minute, and I've made it largely unavailable. It is still there, but I just need to edit something out.
Oh.
So yeah, so this is a 9-part huge television event in its day, produced in the early 90s by Charles Patterson, by the BBC. Had 3 different directors on it. The director of the first 3 episodes, Stuart Urban, recently did an interview for my channel. So you can go and watch that. It's under the industry interviews section. The storyline is basically about 4 friends who live on the outskirts of working class Newcastle in the 60s. And we follow their lives right through until I think the last episode is 95. Was it 95?
Yes. Yeah.
And the opening line of the entire piece, which, as I said, is originally based on a play, is little did we know it then, but the decisions that we would make back in this time would affect the future of our lives forever. Something along those lines. And it's interesting to examine that mantra in your own life, and when you look back on it, especially at my age, and you look at decisions you've made, big decisions that had became huge turning points in your life and stuff like that, and you wonder, oh, maybe if I'd done this differently or listened to that person or made this decision, how would my life be different now? Okay, so as before, we're going to do a breakdown of this episode by episode. We'll try not to make it too long-winded, but and what's great is that Dark Hour is here. He's coming to this completely green, didn't know anything about the show before, committed to watching, I think it's about 15 hours of TV.
Give or take, yeah. Each one was about an hour to an hour 20 minutes, give or take.
I think they're all around almost an hour and a half. Probably about an hour 20.
Super close attention to how long an hour, I think, for sure.
Yeah. They're almost like feature length. I was being attacked by a spider then. I think it was a moth. Right. If you suddenly see me go running off screen, you know that I'm trying to kill a creature of some kind. All right, let's get into episode 7. So episode 7 is set in 1984, and in the height of 1984, I think one of the things that's worth mentioning is that England, there were 2 major narratives going on in England. One was that there was a huge political shift. The Conservative Party, not a million miles away from the Republicans, for any Americans who want to understand the nature, they had seized power for the first time in quite a long time. And as a result of some of the cuts and things that were being made, the whole country was plagued by strikes. One of the biggest strikes was the coal industry, and of course the coal industry was being replaced in a lot of homes by electricity, so the need for coal was sort of reducing over time, and a lot of the coal pits were being closed because they were no longer financially viable. The problem was that what you need to understand in English society is that there were whole towns that had grown around collieries, and I imagine that's not that dissimilar in America, right? You've got like the mining belt in places like Pennsylvania.
Yeah. We have areas, I think, really where towns built around, like iron mining. Yeah, there was coal mines. There was, even like modern day, there's oil refineries that have become like the basis for towns as well. So
right, yeah. So I mean, any industry like that, whether it's, for example, Sheffield, if you've seen the show, and forgive me for looking down, I'm just going to try and put my phone on silent, which I realized it wasn't. If you've seen the film, the Full Monty, that's about
I've never seen it, but I know of it.
Yeah, watch the movie's good. Forget the TV show. Don't watch the TV show. They tried to kind of do a retcon thing on it. Just watch the original movie that came out in the 90s. It's about a group of out of work steel workers from Sheffield. Sheffield was the city of steel. The steel industry kind of died on its arse. Everybody was out of work, and a group of out of work steel workers decide to effectively become strippers, and that's the
as
plot
you do.
of the, it's the plot of the Full Monty. It's a similar plot that's going to occur with a whole lot of YouTubers. When YouTube is no longer viable, we're all going to have to become strippers and make our living that way. So
I thought you already did that, Lance. I thought that was your thing that you moonlit doing.
The critical twerker. People pay money for me not to leave the house.
They're like, put the clothes back on, please. Put them back on.
There's a lot of information about the miners' strike, and it's really well covered in this show. There's a lot of really subtle nuance, and we'll get into that. But you can read all about it. I'm going to just put up a quick picture. But one of the things that it did do, and it is covered in the show, is it really, really divided communities, because people were out of work for a very long time. And if you decided to go back to work because you had to feed your family, you became what was known as a scab.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you were betraying your fellow workers, and you were becoming a scab, and you were going back. So the beginnings of the strike are really the opening scene of 1984, and it opens on this scene where we see a group of miners. They've just gone out on strike at the local colliery nearby. It never says exactly where it is, but it's supposed to be near where several of our key characters have grown up. And what's really interesting is the opening scene where the police turn up.
Yeah.
And you think the police are going to get heavy-handed with the strikers, and then they're like, "Right, so who ordered sandwiches, or who ordered the?"
They have they basically bring them lunch. Yeah,
and because these were local bobbies who knew all the miners, they'd all grown up together, they'd all gone to school together. They understood why they were striking. They knew that they were on hard times. They were quite sympathetic to them. It wasn't until the police force from outside of the local areas came in as reinforcements in heavy numbers that whole attitude and demographic changed. So I think that's really well established. Did you, as somebody who didn't know anything about the miners' strike, did the beginning of episode 7 set that up quite well for you?
At first, I actually had to rewatch the beginning again to the first 20 minutes or so of episode 7, I got through it, and I was like, nah, I want to go back, because they do drop a lot really quick.
There's quite a lot in there in the first 20 minutes. And I remember when I watched it, I missed the fact that the older character, the policeman, was Anthony, was Tosca's son.
Yeah, that was one thing that threw me off at first, because there's the one don't arrest the one guy or whatever, because it's too much paperwork, which is actually a pretty common thing in the United States too, that they'd rather not arrest you if they can avoid it, just to avoid the paperwork.
Yeah, Christopher, the character of Christopher Collins.
Yeah, and so there was a lot going on there. They had the local politician or something drives by and honks for, because it's got a sign that says honk if you're pro or anti something. I don't remember what exactly what the sign said, but the and they honk, and then someone points out who it is. And he's like, why would he be here? And it's clearly that it's, things are about to start happening. I do like the what you mentioned, the dichotomy of how they all work together, and they're the fact that they come in, they ask them they want lunch, and then all the miners start doing what someone might call locker room talk. They're like, oh, we're working extra hours because we have to keep you guys, and oh, well, that's just because we're going to bang your wives afterwards and stuff. They're going back and forth, and stuff that you normally wouldn't do with the police. It really does reinforce that these guys do know each other well, because it's definitely fun banter back and forth.
Yeah, this introduces us to this is actor Daniel Casey, who plays Anthony. Who
Sorry, I'm still like had the residuals from being sick like last week, so if I'm coughing too much, I'll try to mute.
Don't worry, I'll do the same. Daniel Casey plays Anthony, who is the son of Tosca, the character played by Mark Strong. He's now, I guess, in this episode, he's kind of in his early 20s.
Yeah, I got the like between like 22 and 25 vibe from him.
Yeah, probably. I mean, he's got a kid, isn't he? He's got a kid. He's got a wife. He's a Bobby on the beat. And the other thing that the 1984 episode covers really well, the beginnings of, and it's a thread throughout from here to the end of the show, is the breakdown of the family unit. So we've gone from the 60s and 70s where it's 2.4 children, and all of our 4 leads, their parents are all still together apart from Jordy's mother, who we never really know what happened to her. She probably died young, I think. RNTNZ just saying he's a big fan of Mark Strong. Thanks for dropping in, buddy. Really appreciate the $2.
I can figure out exactly how old he is. I just realized that. Just give me a second.
Yeah, because you can figure out Anthony. Anthony's born in, I think, the 2nd episode.
Well, he would have been born 9 months after the 1st episode.
That's right. So the 1st episode is set in 64. So he would have been born. Yeah, he would have been born either.
Let's call it 65. We'll call it 65. Yeah.
Let's go with 65. And then this episode is 1984. So he's not that old.
Actually, he's only 19. He's like 19, 20.
And he's already got a kid and a wife. Although I think that may come in the next episode. But yeah. So RRTNZ is just a piece of information for us here. Strong's birth name was Marco Salucia. I think that's a kind of a cool.
I'm surprised. I would have went with that, but I get Strong also. Nice.
I think at the time when he was starting out, cool foreign names probably weren't a thing. You could definitely go with that now.
But also, like actors tend to like to have, if they can, monosyllabic last names because it's easier to remember.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that tidbit of information, by the way. And he says that his mum actually changed it rather than him.
Oh, okay.
Clearly didn't like the dad. So I think Daniel Casey, by the way, is a good actor. Just to give him a shout.
He was also a good choice. So little thing that I love with anytime like casting directors is, in my opinion, one of the most important
Agreed.
of all. Yeah. And casting directors who are able to pick people that have the look of, when it's a younger version and an older version of a character, or a son, daughter. Nothing jars me more than someone who doesn't look like they could possibly be the kid of these two people.
Yeah.
And I get a little bit of that with the daughter, actually. Like, the daughter doesn't really look like either Mark Strong or GINA.
It's a bit of that role is a bit of a nothing role. So
yeah,
probably
she's in like maybe 3 scenes, right. So it's really not that big of a deal. But he's very integral. So he looks like he'd be in between the two of them. Like, he has traits that kind of match up with both of them. So
I would agree. Yeah, and he's got the anger and frustration of both his parents passed down to him, the stubbornness of his dad, and
both his parents are stubborn. I would argue that Mary is very stubborn as well about like her career and stuff.
I mean, as a character, he's inherited all of the worst traits of his parents.
But he does have. There is a compassion to him. There's definitely
sure.
You can tell he wants to be a better person than his parents were. I just don't think he necessarily has the tools to do so, because he essentially grew up in a broken situation.
Yeah.
And so he's missing a lot of the tools that a person would have to cope with that kind of stuff. And you know, his father figure, whereas like not the worst father figure, obviously not nearly as bad as Jordy's from the first episode.
No, indeed. Yeah.
You know, was a bit on the absent side post divorce. The mother has severe workaholic like syndrome, and so he's kind of just left out with these, you know, like you said, lingering problems.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he is very much his parents. He's the product of his parents' marriage.
Yeah.
I think it's
I think it hits, and like I know like the sister isn't really involved from this point forward, but you do get the hints that she's a little bit more sheltered from it, maybe because she was younger when it all went down. They also made apparently like one of the lines, it kind of seemed like Mark Strong, you know, Tosker, made it more of a point to get to be closer to the daughter from time to time than the son. And it was almost like a throwaway line that that was said. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something she said. And so like, yeah, there's definitely a lot of pent up frustration, so to say.
So I'm just going to pull up a picture of Chris Eccleston. It's not one from the show, but
they did a really good job with him throughout the show.
I mean, it's one of his best roles, because I mean, for any of these actors, you know, this is a dream job. It's like you get to do this arc where all of the characters go through big changes. All of them have phases when they're good and they're bad.
I can just tell you they did a damn good job of predicting what he was going to look like when he was the age at the end of the show.
This is him at that age for real.
Yeah, it's looked, except for the hair's significantly shorter, but
yeah.
Other than that, that's pretty much spot on what he looks like at the end of the show.
So let's take the story forward. So Nikki and Mary, GINA MCKEE, meet up, and we learn that Nikki's been to El Salvador, and this would of course be at the time of the events depicted in the James Woods movie. If you've seen the James Woods movie,
which movie is that?
It's called El Salvador.
Oh, it's called El Salvador. Okay,
and
that's easy to remember.
He plays an award-winning journalist photographer, so very similar to Nicky Hutchinson's character, and he takes some crucial photographs and kind of is able to tell the world what's going on over there. And there was also one of the terrible things that happened during that time was the rape and murder of 3 American nuns.
You know, I've heard of that story before.
Actually. Yeah, that was a really big thing. And yeah, and I mean that film is it's a good but disturbing film. Yeah. So I think it's clear when he comes back from there, he's seen things. If you've seen the El Salvador movie, he's probably seen people being shot on the street, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's changed him, and he's reassessed his life. And I think he's realized that his role in life was to capture moments of history, i.e. with his camera, rather than to shape or change them. That's what I got from those scenes.
So this might have been, of the 3 episodes, I personally found the 7th episode to be the weakest. But this particular scene, sorry.
That's all right.
This particular scene, however, was probably one of the most powerful scenes of the 3 episode arc here, because he says something along the lines of like, I was seeing people who were having trouble getting basic needs, basic healthcare, basic education, basic like clean water.
Yeah.
And he was like, it was not too dissimilar to things I've seen, but what was different was I had changed. And he mentions that like he thanks Mary for buying him the camera, and which is great because that's a throwback to like the first 10 minutes of the first episode. He's still using the same camera that he's been using all along, which you'll see where that goes. But the fact that essentially he goes through like this little explanation about how what he thought he was supposed to do was actually he was lying to himself, basically, and that he was really just trying to get in power for the sake of power, thinking that, you know, like that would change things. But really, what, like you just said, showing the world what was going on was really what his mission was.
Yeah. Yeah. Then we meet his father again, Felix. This is him here, played by the wonderful Peter Vaughan. People will remember him from The Night's Watch and in
the Maester.
Game of Thrones. Felix and his wife Florrie are watching the news. They're disturbed by a local yob that we learn later is Christopher Collins, who's played by Craig Conway. You can also see an interview with him on my channel. Fantastic actor. This was his first role, his first professional job.
After watching how well he plays a delinquent, I'm not sure I want to watch that interview.
He's a really lovely guy. I mean, he's a really great guy, and
he legit plays like it's rare for me to really like hate a character, because I know I know when a character is makes you dislike them, it's doing its job, but I like really hated this character. It was like,
well, like I mentioned earlier, his character represents the breakdown of the traditional family unit. He doesn't know who his dad is. He lives with his mother, who's got a new boyfriend, and they own a vicious dog.
Yes,
which we find out about later. I'm not sure if the dog attacks in this episode, but I think
he does. Yeah,
is it in this episode?
Yeah, it's toward the end of this episode.
We'll get there. Yeah, I'm working through it. And of course, Chris Collins keeps like knocking on their door and running away. And Felix knows who's behind it. Anthony, who's we establish again is now a policeman, goes and arrests Collins, and we realize that this kid, who's, you know, barely a teenager, we learn he's already got a kid. So he himself has already got a kid. So this is that beginning of the breakdown of the family unit, kids going astray, teenage pregnancy. It represents so many things that started changing in society around that time for people in the working class that all kind of unraveled from, you know, sort of traditional values and stuff, largely because of lack of guidance, poverty, being told they weren't good enough. I'm not going to heap it all on that character's shoulders. He's a product of the society that he's living in. Now the Willow Lane flats have gone, but instead of the Willow Lane flats, we've got what's called housing estates. And they were not much better. We've got quite a few of those in London. There's a really big one near me called Broadwater Farm, which was the scene of huge riots in the 80s, where a load of police went round to a flat, stormed the wrong address, and the black woman who was there died of a heart attack. As you can imagine, that did not go down well with the local community, and you know, led to riots and the death of a policeman. So the Willow Lane, you've now got the Willow Lane estate, these kind of 3-level, big, sprawling, tiered concrete jungles, effectively, and that sort of sets up a lot. There's a lot of setup going on in this episode, which all continues towards the end of the show, and then we cut back to Eddie in Parliament, who now sort of seems to be a product of his own ego.
I'm not really sure.
Kind of ineffectual.
I'm not really sure exactly how to explain him. He's kind of overstayed his welcome, I would say. It's he was a person who got back into it to kind of like change things, and now like effectively has become just someone who's been hanging around and just kind of shit talking. And I do know that British politics, particularly back then comparatively to the United States, there tends to be a little bit more jarring between like I especially in, I think it's the House of Lords, I think is like the one that like they'll like take pop shots at each other's families and stuff. But you guys definitely have more personal attacks, at least back then. It's started nowadays in the United States, we get that a lot. But in the 80s and 90s, it was definitely more leaning towards that, and he's definitely leaning into that. Like, he's not really particularly trying to do anything in Parliament. He's just sitting there and just saying everyone sucks, essentially.
Yeah, he's just sitting there and just aggravating the other side, which is what a lot of politicians end up doing, and living off the perks and you know, enjoying over drinking at the bar.
He even says it. He's approaching like retirement age. You know, he's not like he doesn't even really feel like he can do much more. Not so much in this episode. The next episode, you kind of see how ineffective he is anymore. But
so through her, we've got the mention of Claudia Seabrook, who's his main conservative rival. She almost, as a amalgamation of characters, she kind of stands in for Thatcher, strong female conservative.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that being like a Thatcher kind of a Jace sort of character.
Yeah, I mean, we know Thatcher's in power because we see her in footage, but Seabrook,
and also anybody who knows history knows that she was in power at the time.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, she represents everything Thatcher's about, and she's determined to break the strikes, the miners' strikes, which are, in the view of her party, holding the country to ransom. We cut back to, and we did have some blackouts, by the way, as a result of those strikes in different parts of the countries around this time. They weren't didn't go on for weeks or anything, but you'd occasionally have a day where it's like, we're going to have no electricity on Thursday, just letting you know, go and buy candles. You know, that did happen. Thank God we had a gas cooker.
I've never lived through anything like that here, but I do know that there are sections of the country in the United States that have like rolling brownouts from time to time.
Right.
They're like planned blackouts, basically, to conserve power in areas. So.
Well, then we cut back to up north, and we're introduced to a selection of pitmen characters, and there's a meeting, and tensions now arising between the police and also the scabs, as it were, wanting to go back to work. And we see another group of men walk out of this meeting. They go and get into a van, and you're thinking, where are they going? And I thought at first they were going back to work, hiding in this van, but they weren't. They're going to a meeting with other miners who are talking about breaking the strike and going back to work, because by now the strike's been going on a while. And I think the miners' strike, it was 84 to 85. So it was a year and a half.
Okay, that's what RMT stood for, Rail, Maritime, and Transport Union. Okay, because I saw it a couple of times, RMT Union, and I wasn't really sure what it stood for. And sometimes I'll look things up, but like I try not to do it too much when I'm watching something, because I might miss something that's being said. So.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, I think you're allowed, because you know you're not British, so I'm always googling acronyms from American shows all the time.
I end up googling the actors a lot more to see like what else they were in. So I like that stuff. It's not that I'll let that go. Like if I remember to look it up, I remember to look it up, kind of thing.
Did you find yourself googling the name Arthur Scargill, because he's mentioned in scenes, but he's the head.
I didn't Google
the head of the miners' union.
Okay. I remember them saying it multiple times. I figured that he was just some sort of high-ranking member of the union.
This is him in the South. I've got to tell you, in the South, he was a hated figure because he was always in the news. He was always seen on the front lines of the strikes. He'd make sure, he got a shot on camera. And he was the one who was making the various demands, standing up to Thatcher. So he became this kind of hated figure in the South. And don't forget, as a youth, I didn't understand all the political nor the social economic demographics of all this. I still got my Lego for Christmas. I was very happy. But, he was doing what he thought was right. But he was also one of these people that, to be fair, I don't think he ever went hungry. Do you know what I mean? So, but he is mentioned in this episode. And there's a brief bit of footage. I don't know if you remember this, where you see mounted police charge a load of miners, and that's called the Battle of Colgrave. And it was where the miners striking and the police trying to break the strike and let the scabs go into work.
Yeah, that's not the like.
It was a battle.
Is that the big riot at the end of the episode you're talking about? Like,
no, well, that is kind of loosely inspired by it. But the battle for Colgrave is seen on the news near. In this episode at some point, and that was the biggest confrontation. There were many, but that was the big one.
One thing I did notice, so like. It was a fun little exercise that I had throughout the show because the intro is the way they do the intro has scenes from the whole show, the whole 9
That's
episodes.
Right. Yeah. With
and they're for the most part in order, a little bit changed here and there, but and the one that kept jumping out at me and kept standing out to me was the police officers like running and screaming like a battle between in like medieval Scotland or something, and it was like I kept saying like that seems so out of place with everything else that's going on in that intro, and then that ends up happening in this episode. So
yeah, we're coming up to that. So one of the next things that arrives that happens is that you got we cut back to Tosca's storyline briefly, and we're introduced to the local politician who is also the person who's in charge of the Masons. By this time, Tosca is kind of considered to be a well-respected businessman, making some money. So
he's definitely like a mid-level business guy. Like he's not like like at that time millionaire, which would be like a billionaire now, but he's definitely like upper half, like upper middle class level. So
this is Larry Lamb who plays that character.
Is that what was his name? Alan Rowe, I think that was
Alan Rowe. That's right.
Alan Rowe, yeah.
He's a fantastic British character actor. He did a really good job of playing Bruce Reynolds in the film about Buster Edwards, the great train robber, which is called Buster, in which Phil Collins plays Buster. That's a 1986 movie. Probably not a lot of people remember it now, but it's actually a really good film. It's a really good depiction of the robbery itself as well. Wonderful score by Anne Dudley, and Larry Lamb is brilliant in that. And that's actually the film that kind of introduced him to me. He's quite good as Alan Rowe in this. He's another sort of a local politician, businessman with his fingers in lots of pies. He's a conservative. He sees Tosca as a useful tool, and Tosca, of course, is with Tracy now, and Tosca sucking up to and creates tension with his wife, who doesn't like him. Simple as.
You mean Elaine? Tracy's
Elaine, played by Tracy Wilkinson.
Yeah. I was gonna say her name's Elaine.
Yes. Thank you for.
Oh, it's funny because actually, as the show goes on and they like make her look a little bit older, she kind of like looks more attractive as she gets older. It's like a weird thing I just noticed as I was going. I was like, it's weird. It's like, they I guess like they just I don't know, she just had like a better look for like middle-aged, I guess. I don't know.
I think when you first meet her, she's just a girl at the club, and
yeah, she's just kind of like average, and then I guess maybe they were like glamming her up a little bit because now she's like has money kind of thing. Maybe that might have been it. It might have been some of that, but she was definitely like dressing nicer and stuff as the show went on. So
the next scene is the police from down south arrive at the local colliery. They turn up at the bunk room at the police station, and there's a few lines of dialogue when they arrive that illustrates the north and south divide, even between the local police and the police that have arrived from out of town. And they're spearheaded, or the character that kind of represents their attitude is played by a brilliant character actor who's called Sean Gilder. This is the guy who's leading that baton charge.
Yeah, that's the one I remember, who's like screaming like.
Yeah, he's got a very distinctive face. He like turns up, all right, mate, and then they wanted trouble. They fucking well got it.
Yeah, he's definitely like, you could see, like I could see like looking at this picture, even though he's older here, I'm like, I just see the same guy. It's like
he's a great actor. He's he's one of those actors who I feel doesn't get the praise he deserves. So I wanted to give him a shout out here, and I've followed his career since this. And he's always turning up in things here and there. I'd like to see him get some bigger parts, but I've bumped into him about 4 times on the London Underground, the tube, the subway. And every time I see him, I'm like, our friends in the North, mate. And then the second time I saw him, I say, you remember me? We talked about our friends in the North. The third time, I'm like, it's me again, our friends in the North.
He's like, damn it, I'm never going to escape this guy.
Next time I see him, I'm going to say, mate, British actors you on my YouTube channel. Go and check it out.
British actors need American cinema to go back to historical dramas where you guys play big name villains. That's what the British actors need. Those were the breakout roles for a lot of British actors.
He'd make a great kind of like Prince John or
like that's what we need to like go like in order to like. That's the thing is that's not like for years. British actors were always playing big name villains or even smaller part villains, and even if it didn't make sense, like even if it was like, oh, look at all these Romans, it was just a bunch of people with British accents. It was like it made no sense. I think that's hurt the British actor market a little bit. The lack of villain Brits out there.
Well, we need to get a few more Alan Rickmans.
Probably the all-time best villain British guy of all time.
I mean, God rest his soul. He's so sorely missed from our screens. I can't think of anyone.
The amount of movies that I've watched with that guy in it,
he's amazing. Well, the next thing that happens is they turn up in force, and they go down. They turn up at the colliery. And, these vans come, huge numbers of police, all tooled up with riot gear and everything.
Yeah, riot shields. And it was weird because at first I saw the riot shields and they were like round, like Captain America's shield. And then I looked further behind them and they had the more traditional, like tall ones, the full body riot shield. So it was almost like there was like 2 levels of riot gear. Like,
yeah, that's a good point. I now you say that, I know exactly what you're talking about. There was like the basics kit got given to the local police, and the ones who came from outside had the heavier gear.
Yeah, it's like the tall, like the 6 foot, like they basically you could go put them next to each other and almost form like a phalanx kind of like situation.
And the other thing that was interesting about it was, so now this confrontation occurs. The miners are all at like a fundraiser in the community hall. So there's only a few of them actually down at the pit. The rest of them are all at a community hall down the other side of town.
Yeah.
And suddenly the word gets to them that the police have turned up in big numbers. So, of course, they all get on a coach and head down there. The police stop them from getting in initially, allowing the tensions to build, and then a fight breaks out, and eventually they let them in. So at first, and then they let the local police unit go in at first, and they keep all the riot police back, and this big fight unfolds, and they do it deliberately, and they wait until their own guys are getting overwhelmed, including Anthony, who sort of gets, he's in the middle of it, isn't he?
Yeah, he's almost like having like a panic attack, like in the middle of it. Like it's very much like he can't even really comprehend what's going on.
He calls for support at one point on his radio, and he's sort of like, and the senior officer can see him, and he's just letting it play out. He's letting it play out. I've actually found a pretty good. I think this must be the original trailer for the show. I'm just going to put the link for it in the.
I will hold the line here for a second. So yeah, so basically the riot's going on, and they are holding back the like half of the
Sorry
members.
about that.
It's okay. I just kept going on. I was like, they're holding back half the members, and
well done.
Then it gets
well
overwhelmed, and then they like kind of release it. They even one of the people that they even hold back is it's not even really. They just throw Eddie Wells onto the bus to like hold him there.
Yeah, because he's at the fundraiser, isn't he, in the town hall?
Yeah, and he like kind of walks out, and he wanders up to the bus because he sees people being like held in this bus,
And
and he goes, he like questions
local
the police.
MP, he demands to be let through, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, well, he also wants answers. He's like, "Why are you holding these people? It's part of, they're his constituents. He has a right to ask that question." And instead, they push him on the bus, and he's like, "What are you doing?" Like, yeah, they hold him in there for it's an undisclosed amount of time. It's probably about like 20 minutes. And then stuff starts going down, and then eventually they like let them go to like make the riot worse, essentially.
Yeah.
It was like it was almost like a strategic, like, okay, we have enough guys that our dudes can kind of hold off, and then we'll bring the rest, and then we can use more force because now they're overwhelmed. It was very strategically set up that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's a great 25th anniversary video of I think the BFI did it. And I'm guessing they probably did this it was one of the things they did in lockdown 2 years ago, so towards the end of lockdown, and they got a load of people on a Zoom call, including Chris Eccleston. So, but there's some shots of. I won't play too much of it because YouTube will ratio me pretty quick, I think. But this is a clip of the miners' strike stuff happening in action.
Honestly, I think with the way that it's set up, you probably could play this for quite a while and it wouldn't pick it up. A lot of times things that are not in 1920 by 1080 has trouble identifying.
Oh, well, this is a really good, there's Claudia Seabrook, good shot of her. You said did you Google this actress, or was it the younger
I
one?
Googled
the younger American. It was the younger American that Eddie Wells
who's now involved with British politics. I don't know if she was I couldn't get much info on her because she was only in like 4 acting roles. I couldn't tell if she was an American living in Britain or just somebody, because I couldn't tell.
She could have
someone with a foreign accent, or like, I guess,
she could have been a British actress doing an accent. But that's, I mean, for this episode, that's pretty much I guess if you want to call it, it's the big action scene, really.
Yeah.
For the episode. And this stuff really happened. And the two Roddy brothers, are based on 2 real people, one of whom was not involved in the fight at all and went, got a considerable prison sentence.
Yes.
So that whole stuff with Mary getting involved in their court case and everything, that stuff is all true. Sticking with that storyline, and I'll come back and cover some of the other scenes in a sec. After this is unfolded, because Anthony's in the thick of it, the policeman from down south, Sean Gilder's character, when the other Roddy guy comes in and sees his brother being beaten up by a policeman over the head with a bat, and he says, "What are you doing, mate?" And the guy just turns around and whacks him in the mouth.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was pretty nasty. It was like
knocks him straight out. I mean, considering the things that have happened in America with police brutality and stuff, and did any of that resonate with you?
It did actually kind of hit home, because we have had stuff like that happen recently. Sometimes justified, other times not. There's never a black and white answer to exactly what the situation is. Usually, in this, it's obviously dramatized. But yeah, definitely, it took me to some more recent events in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, because it's interesting because they did a really good documentary about the Battle of Colgreve. It may well be on YouTube, and they interviewed a whole load of the miners that were there and a whole load of the police that were there, and there was quite a lot of reconciliation that went on through that. It was quite it was productive, shall we say. But yeah, I mean, this was for me as a youth, shall we say, when I saw it. the miners' strike was very polarized. In the South, we didn't really understand it. We hadn't been brought up in those kinds of communities. Lived on the edge of London. I didn't understand a community that was all based on one industry. Arthur Scargill was kind of portrayed as the devil. So there wasn't a lot of sympathy for the miners in the South. Hey, Darth Plato, good to see you. Thanks for popping in. But when I saw this, that's one of the things that was great about this story, and that's why it's called Our Friends in the North. It's the people up there that you haven't probably socialized with much. It gave me a real perspective of live community from different parts of the UK that I didn't fully understand or grasp before.
I do find it it's like kind of like I don't want to say the word ironic, but it's there's something about it. It's like, here in the United States, a lot of times it's not really a derogatory term, but like the people often go, oh, down in the South, it's this, down in the South. And it seems like you guys have the opposite, I guess, because London's on the southern coastline. So it's like, the North is really the farthest point away from society, if you will. It's, which is, it's weird for me to see that flip there, so to say.
You've got that funny scene as well where when this fight's all unfolding, you cut back to the dance and it's all just the women are left there and like maybe a couple of really old guys.
Yeah, like basically the representatives for the union who were probably just on their way out anyway. They wouldn't have been doing much physical labor. The one thing that I do find the most interesting about the riot is that I think it was the guy you put up on the screen. I forgot what you said his name was.
Sean Gilder.
Yeah. He I think it's him who grabs Nikki's camera and
he does
rips the film out, which makes me cringe because it's like, that's the worst thing you can do to film. It's all overexposed now. It's useless. But I know that was the point.
Yeah.
But which I don't really know too much about your guys' setup, but in the United States that would be a huge no-no, because that would be the right to press would be being violated. I don't know if you guys have like a setup, like a
we do
for that.
We do, and I mean, of course, now with everything being digital and live and instant, and police having to wear body cameras and stuff.
Yeah,
people are brought to book or can be brought to book a lot quicker than before. But this is back in the day when don't see, don't tell.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the evidence goes right out the window. It's but like had that particular officer been found to do that, he would have been violating the Bill of Rights. He would have been violating somebody's rights. They would have been actually taken up as not just a regular crime. It would have been a rights-based crime, and it would have been way worse for him.
Yeah.
So,
well, picking up on the other storylines, and I'll try and wrap this up because we've got 2 other episodes to cover yet.
I kind of had a feeling this one might run slightly longer.
Because a lot happens. A lot happens in this episode.
So the next 2 are a little bit more streamlined.
So Gina McKee's character Mary agrees to represent the Roddy brothers. And the night after all this happens is the night where finally Mary and Nikki end up sort of together. No one else is around. There's a huge sense of relief, and it suddenly happens between them, and they're together. It's really well filmed, that scene.
I love the fact that Eddie Wells calls and
that I was back.
What's going on?
Yeah, well, he wants to find out what's going on about representation. Shall I come over to discuss it? Because Eddie's like,
no, don't come over.
No. Yeah, don't come now. We'll see you in the morning. And they stay up all night. They don't go to bed. They're like up all night. First of all, at it, and then they're
even when they're not. They're just kind of like reconnecting,
talking, very affectionate. It's a really beautiful scene. One of the best actually in the episode. And then of course, while they're going down to sort everything out, the next day is when Christopher Collins, Craig Conway's character, attacks Florrie in the street. And it's funny because Florrie tries to diffuse him by telling him to ignore his own friends, the peer pressure of his own friends to behave like an idiot, effectively. And he unfortunately kind of succumbs to the pressure of them, and ultimately he pushes Florrie over. So of course Felix loses his shit, says, right, that's it. And of course, back in Felix's day, if that sort of dispute did take place, here's Craig Conway in a similar age, not a bit older than he was there. But I don't know, by the way, I don't know if you've seen the horror film The Descent.
Yes, yeah, I have seen The Descent.
Right, Craig Conway is the guy who plays the creatures in The Descent.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He's in all of Neil Marshall's films, man. So it was funny because the week that Drinker interviewed Neil Marshall was the week that I interviewed Craig. So I had Craig on my channel. Will had Neil, and
that's pretty cool. That's a cool.
Yeah,
little,
it was cool. It was quite you know, and Craig is a really nice guy. He's a good friend of mine, actually, and it gives me a lot more time than he needs to, which is always lovely. And he's got loads of great stories, and the interview with him is fantastic. But yeah, so it's that thing of Felix thinks he'll be able to go and talk man to the dad and it'll all get sorted out. But of course, he doesn't realize he's walking into a dysfunctional family nightmare. And then you've got there's this dog, pit bull dog, and it keeps saying, "Can you not control your dog, man?" And eventually, you know, having tried, he tries to kind of like talk like he would back in the old days when, you know, kids would respect their elders. And again, this whole scene represents that dynamic shift of it doesn't work like that anymore. This is a dysfunctional family. This stepfather doesn't give a shit about you. In fact, he hates you. And there's that horrible moment where it turns, and Felix is really scared, and he goes, "Oh, you're shitting yourself now, aren't you? Fucking knocked on the wrong door and all this." And
by the way, I have to say this. I mean, and I speak with a lot of, you know, people from England, obviously, since I've started this.
Yeah.
Some of those northern accents, man, they're rough. They're hard to understand what they're saying sometimes.
Yeah,
I had to rewind quite a few times for some of these more like, I guess what we would call rural accents. I don't know what your term
well,
would
you
be.
You can always add subtitles.
The YouTube subtitles that I was using. Oh, shit. I wasn't supposed to say I watched on that. Sorry, even they were terrible. I was like, they were like making up words. I was like, that was.
Well, yeah, they can be rubbish, but I mean, the Newcastle accent is, or the Jordy accent as it's known. If it's a thick Jordy accent, well, hey man, you know, it's quite.
It reminded me like of some of the deep South United States accents where I'm like, this is not the right language. You're speaking something else. I was like, you guys, at one point I remember saying to myself, I was like, and they invented the language. And I have no idea what they're saying. It's just like, you know.
When Felix, he's attacked, and the next time we see him, it's in hospital. And when he returns home, he's not going back to his old home anymore. They've got a bungalow, partly as a result of the assault that he's received, and he starts showing the early signs of dementia, which is going to be his storyline from here on out.
Either dementia or Alzheimer's. And I was curious as to whether or not that attack had something to do, like he hit his head or something.
I think that exacerbated it, and it also the shock of, you know, if you get assaulted, which I have been, unfortunately. The shock that leaves you is quite severe, and it can be really disorientating. So if you think one day you leave your house, you get assaulted, you spend some time in hospital. When you come out of hospital, you find you're living somewhere else. That of itself is a big change for someone.
Yeah. And that becomes one of the main stories throughout the remaining 2 episodes as well. It's very very much a driving force for specifically Nikki, actually. So I mean, but everybody kind of has something to connected to this in a way because of what happens in the last episode.
Another interesting subplot about this is that you've now got the two Roddy brothers are up in court for assaulting policemen, whereas we know that the reality is that one of them was actually assaulted by police.
Yes.
And it's good that it's a bit both ways, you know. And you know, they learned that they want Anthony to testify, but he knows if he testifies as a policeman, his career's finished. That's it. He'll never advance in rank.
They even basically tell him that, like,
yeah,
flat out. Like, they're not allowed to say it, but they heavily imply it.
Yeah, they have a meeting with him and you know, ask how he's doing, and then it's sort of like, yeah, well, you know, what did you see? You know, it's a really horrible scene, and
this is what I was saying before, that like you could tell he does have a level of compassion, because he doesn't want to just go with it. He's like, no, this isn't the right thing to do right off the bat. He knows it's not the right thing to do to go along, but he's stuck between a rock and a hard place, quite like, you know.
But it's really interesting that the thing that makes him change his mind is not his mother's pleas. It's he goes down the pub with his dad for a drink, Tosca, Mark Strong's character, and it's because his dad says, you're better off towing the line. You don't want to do that. And as soon as his dad tells him not to do it, he's like, screw you, Dad. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to testify. I'm not going to do what you would do. So and that's what makes him turn up at the court, which means that one of the Roddy brothers doesn't go to prison.
Yeah. And he doesn't even have to testify, though. Just him showing up shows to the prosecution that they might not have as strong of a case as they expected. So they essentially throw out the charges on the one guy, but the other guy is kind of screwed. I think he gets 3 or 4 years as a plea bargain.
Yeah. And then you've got he's like a suspended sentence. I think he doesn't have to do any prison time, and the other one
it's a 12-month suspended sentence. He basically is he gets to walk free, essentially.
That whole narrative as well, I think, also kind of shows that Nikki is more of a father figure to Anthony than Tosca is, which is quite important. There's also a wonderful line, and I forget who says it. I can't remember if it's Elaine, who's annoyed with Tosca for getting too involved in the Freemasons, but somebody describes the Freemasons as the mafia of the mediocre.
I think it was Elaine.
I wrote that down because it's such a good line. You're being led by the mafia of the mediocre.
It's because if I recall correctly, in this episode, he got involved, like he was basically getting involved with like the early start of buying property. Like a slumlord, essentially.
And Alan Rowe is kind of leading all of his business decisions in a way.
The beginning and end of this episode had so much going on. The middle had pretty much just the riot for the most part, and then it's end capped on both sides with these really dense setup portions, which part of the reason I didn't like I felt that they could have maybe sprinkled it a little bit better, instead of being like the first 10 minutes is this, and then the middle is a lot of the same.
I hear what you're saying. Could have been
also there's no Jordy in this episode, which really annoyed me, because I'm like,
actually, funnily enough, I don't think he's in this episode at all.
Not at all. I was like sitting there waiting, and when it finally ended, I was like, he didn't appear once. Like,
and he's of the 4 leads, he is the most sympathetic character. So before we move on to episode 8, the other thing that I think it's a really powerful scene, I mean, especially for me, because my father in the last couple of years of his life had dementia, and so Felix and Florrie are watching TV. They're in the new bungalow, and he just gets up and he leaves, and he's walking along the street, and he bumps into a woman, and she's like, "Have you seen my dad, pet?" And he's almost regressed to like a childhood state. And then later on, we've got another scene where Florrie is with him in what was his old street where he was brought up, and he's looking for his dad, and he's going up and down the street, and he gets to one
end. That was the
and
beginning of the next episode, actually.
Was that at the beginning of the next? I thought it was
believe
this one.
so. No, because it ends with him on the street, like asking that.
That's right. Yeah, asking about his dad, and then yeah. No, you're right. That's that. Yeah.
It because of the way that the episodes like basically were cut, and they don't look particularly older or different. It seemed like it was all one big scene, but that's
Nikki
one negative
Mary...
for some of the. I think I said it in the last time we spoke. The one negative for some of the more of the lesser characters, I don't want to call them minor because they're still important. Like Eddie Wells, the parents, they don't really change much from episode to episode, whereas the main characters look vastly different from so sometimes the more minor storylines can get a little jumbled in your head because they don't look different.
No, I follow you on that. I think the other thing that happens at the end of the episode is Nikki and Mary get engaged.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then we end with the Two Tribes song, when two tribes go to war, which is
the music definitely increased. It's the music in the third act, we'll call it, is much better than the first two. Like maybe it's because it's getting closer to what I know because it's like 80s 90s music. So like that might be like just me. But yeah, the first episode
it's a good track for that episode. The police, the miners, two tribes. Quite liked it. And that brings us to episode 8. And you're right, episode 8 begins with Felix looking for his dad in the old street.
And they keep walking basically back and forth and back and forth. And
he must be at the other end.
Yeah, it's essentially like what people always tell you about like a goldfish. Like by the time it gets to one side of the bowl, it forgets that it was at the other side. It's like essentially that with a person.
And Nikki arrives, and it's quite funny because Nikki's car that he turns up in is a Saab 900.
Yes, yeah.
Which is a tank, which is a gas guzzler. My parents had that car.
I noticed it was a Saab. I know because that's a very distinct logo. It's really easy to pick out.
That's a very distinct model of car, and it had it had a sunroof, and it was quite flash car, and flash family car in its day. I remember when we got it, but the seats had this smell that of the particular fabric on the seats, and the smell of that fabric was so strong it used to make me sick on car journeys. Kind
of reminds me of my parents had a Ford Taurus when I was a kid. It actually ended up being my first car, and it was all fabric interior. So over the years, it just absorbed whatever smells because it was like literally everything. Every inch of this thing was just like padded. And, like just everything that ever got spilled in there or whatever was just always in that smell. Eventually you go nose deaf to it, but.
Yeah, you can buy a used Saab on eBay.
From that, eBay, I don't think I'd buy a full car on eBay.
That same model, just see it for £845.
That's about what? Like that's a little over $1,000.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's around $1,000. I mean, and it honestly, that's probably about as much as it's going to cost you when you put the first tank of petrol in too, because it's like one of the least economically sound cars on the planet.
Like it's like the Ford Pinto. It's like that. Like it's kind of like that. It's just a terribly set up. Doesn't really have economics in check, kind of thing.
And we traded up for a Chrysler Horizon, which was this kind of very small 4-door hatchback. Also had reeking seats that, again,
I think it was just 80s and 90s cars just had probably just cheap padding that just was. Like now, almost every car now that you get has at least some form of leather, whether it be like partial or full. And you don't see a lot that are that full, like everything is that like it almost feels like carpet, like cheap carpet.
Well, there's so going back to when Nikki turns up to retrieve his dad, there's quite a few things that happen here. One is that obviously Felix is thinking his dad's alive. We learn that Felix's dad marched on the Jarrow March.
Yes. Yeah, which is weird that he didn't know that, by the way.
Yeah,
like, because they like reveal that to Nikki. It's like, how did you not know this about your father? Like,
yeah, and Felix
which
also
might explain the disconnect. Like, they just didn't ever talk,
Yeah, exactly. But then there's when Felix is in one of the brief moments where he's in his right mind, he tells Nikki, Chris Eccleston, that he says, "You've always been useless, son." It's this really horrendous moment where he just destroys his son, basically.
That essentially like drives him for the remainder of this episode and the next episode as to like why he's almost having like a midlife crisis.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's kind of it's a horrible moment. I think this is a good shot of Peter Vaughan. I don't know that this is from Our Friends in the North, but he's got the same attire on effectively. I
don't recall him wearing that hat, but yeah.
Yeah, I think he does have that hat.
Maybe he does.
It destroys Nikki, and then I think then we cut to Tosca being a landlord of scummy properties, DOS houses we call them back then.
It's in the United States we probably call that HUD, housing and urban development, or homes and urban development.
Nikki meets Mary and Nikki are in bed. They've sort of seemed to have settled into I guess they've got married. We never see the wedding, but
yeah, I'm assuming that it happened pretty quickly.
Yeah, and they've kind of settled into a life of what seems you'd expect their connection to be stronger, but it feels very mediocre.
Mm-hmm.
I think if that's fair, and
so this is kind of like, here's the thing, and with the way that this obviously we aren't at the last episode yet, but the way the last episode ends, I just want to say, retroactively, not as big a fan of this storyline.
Right.
Yeah. Like, but yeah, they've definitely settled into like a complacency, sort of thing.
I agree with you. You kind of didn't want this outcome for them, that they get married, and because it always feels like they're destined to be together, and then we see them get torn asunder again, which I guess is like real life, but I'm not sure that that's the outcome that I wanted to experience.
One of the main problems, well, there's the main problem right there. The main problem.
He meets a student who, Alice McDonald, who says she's doing a paper on him. What a load of horseshit.
Yeah, she really wasn't. She just wanted to bang him.
Played by the wonderful Colette Brown, who's possibly got the most beautiful eyes on the planet.
Yes, she does that. She was like a smoke show in this show for sure.
Yeah.
Like they like made her like specifically like, it's very attractive. Like they like made sure she looked good in every scene, which is done on purpose. Obviously, she's supposed to be like seducing him.
And that's a recent picture, and she still looks great now.
Yeah, she definitely has. She pretty much barely looks like she's aged there. She maybe looks like she's like 5 years older, but she's clearly 20 years older.
Oh, I hope she gets to see this. She'll be very chuffed to hear you say that.
But yeah, so the one before we get to her though, I want to point out that one of the problems for sure with their relationship is their commitments to their careers.
Yeah.
It's Mary, not Alice. Mary is very committed to helping the local community and being part of everything that's going on with the minor strikes and the housing problems and whatever else. Those are the two main ones they mentioned, but there's other things that she's doing as well. She's essentially like single-handedly running the local Labor Party because Eddie Wells is checked out. He's 65 or 66 and just doesn't care anymore.
Yeah, he doesn't really care anymore at this point.
Yeah, he's checked out of. He's essentially like, he's even tried to like get her to run for his spot, and she's like, I don't have time to because I'm fixing your problems. Essentially,
yeah.
he's very committed to his investigative journalism, which requires he goes away a lot. So and can't really take her with him because she's locked in place. So it's the classic, you know, I'm stuck here and you have to go there.
Yeah.
Problem. Which is exacerbating his issues of he's got like forms of PTSD from seeing what he did over the years as an investigative journalist.
Yeah.
The problems with his father, you know, it's all coming to a head, and that head ends up being what was her real name? I'm sorry,
Colette Brown's
Colette
Brown's character Alice is the character.
Yes, name. and yeah, her basically. I don't know if she wasn't actually doing a dissertation or if after getting involved with him, she'd opted not to do it any longer.
I think it's a bit of both.
I kind of got the sense that she actually did have the intention of doing it, but was soured on him because of what ended up happening.
Yeah, I mean the sexual nature of their relationship we established later is quite aggressive in terms of he appears to be working out a lot of anger issues in the way he makes love and stuff like this. Not violent or anything like that, but it's implied. And I think for a while she finds that exciting and it turns her on, and then later it just becomes boring.
It's also part of, so he was the of all of the characters, he was the most sexually repressed. In the early going, you know, like literally like dry humping, like that's what he was doing. And so like it's almost like he had his sexual awakening in episode 7. I don't think that necessarily he hadn't up to that point, because he did date that one woman and all that stuff. But like that was like his like come to Jesus moment about it. And then he kind of lost it with this mediocrity of their relationship. And so now he's kind of pursuing it again. And that's part of his midlife crisis that's kind of happening.
He's taking pictures in London, and taking pictures of the homeless and this kind of thing, which the situation has increased. And that's when we finally see what Jordy's been up to. And Jordy's now homeless, and he kind of looks a bit like this at this
That's
point.
from the last episode, but yeah,
it is.
Imagine that, but dirtier with a beard.
Yeah, that, but a lot grubbier.
Yeah,
and he's kind of connected with a homeless woman, and he's so out of it, he barely recognized. There's a brief moment where where he recognizes.
He even says, Nikki. And I jump a little bit into the last episode here. He mentions that he didn't want to accept that it was really Nikki. Basically that he didn't want him to see him like this.
Yeah,
and that's why he gets very aggressive, and then Nikki starts basically handing him money.
Yeah, Nikki hands him money and promises to come back the next day and see him, but when he comes back, he's not there. So we know that Jordy's hit even further rock bottom than we thought.
And it's kind of it's a twofold issue with his marriage, Nikki's marriage, is that now he has to go down. He's going there to pursue his affair, but he's also going down there to pursue his friend, which is taking him away more often for things that aren't job related.
Yeah,
which she has a direct connection to why he's supposed to be there. So that's a problem.
Yeah, and Mary sort of begins to sense a change in their relationship, and they start to. It's the beginning of them growing apart. Tosca, there's a great scene with Tosca where he drives into one of the new council estates. It's called Valley View, and he's getting into mortgage lending. That's at the suggestion of Alan Rowe.
Subprime mortgage bubble stuff. That would that hit home too, because that happened more recently in the United States as well. So it's like,
well, you know how it is. We like to do these things first and then send them over to you.
Yeah, that's just the way it is. We get all the remnants from you guys.
I really like it where he's like, he arrives and he sees a load of lads hanging out, and he's like, all right, Bonnie lads, here's £1 each for you. Keep an eye on my car, and there'll be more, another £1 each when I come back. All right. And then he comes back, and the kids are all sort of leaning on the car, and he gives them the money, and then having shown Elaine his plan, and he drives off, and the kids walk off. They've written "fuck off" on the back of his car.
Fantastic! That was such a great little payoff to a gag.
Yeah,
like the whole thing was like, we can't leave the car here, and he's like, don't worry about it, I got this. And it turns out she was completely right. No, they didn't really do. I mean, obviously that wouldn't have been that big of a problem for them. They probably could have got that paint off, but it's still like the visual was fantastic.
No, it's good. And it also kind of, Tosca kind of had that coming in a way.
Yeah. Tosca's a weird character in that, like, I both feel bad and dislike him at the same time. It's like,
I think that's good. I think it's good because I think he's got a good heart, but he's he's always on to the next get rich quick scheme.
He's always looking down the street but not paying attention to the cars. That's a phrase that I've heard.
That's a good way of summarizing him. There's a brief scene where we cut back to Eddie, who's kind of drunk in the House of Commons. As you say, he's kind of making a bit of a fool of himself. He's in the members' bar, and he makes a note of the character played by Peter Lee Wilson, who now runs his own. Colin Butler's the name of the character.
Yeah,
now runs his own PR.
It was from the 5th or 6th episode, the one that was slandering Nikki.
He was slandering Nikki. Hutchinson said he was related to the IRA. He was behind the big push with all the leaflets everywhere. Slimy character. We talked about him before. And
even looks, they picked a good actor. He's got that sniveling little kind of like smile. He's like,
Peter Lee Wilson's a great actor. Shame we haven't seen.
I did have a question for you about, because they do show multiple times, and this is like around one of them where they're in court. Do British judges still wear those wigs?
They do.
They do. Okay, because the United States got rid of that a long time ago. We still have the traditional robes, but they got rid of the wigs.
I think you wear them in. They're not in every court in the land now.
Okay.
Like
high courts kind of stuff.
But I think in some of the high courts, the judges still like to wear them.
The powdered wigs. Yeah, we used to have that in the United States as well, but they did away with that, I believe, at the turn of the century for like the 18 to 1900s.
Yeah, because you see somebody with one on. I think in one of the scenes, there's a brief courtroom scene, isn't there? And
there's that. Well, there was in both of these episodes that we just went over, and I remember that the prosecutor also had one, but it was a little different. It wasn't like off to the side; it was like pulled back. I was just curious if they still do that or not, because I don't have much of a connection to British courts.
I mean, I do my best not to spend time in court, but I believe the high courts still do. The sort of the kind of the smaller courts and family courts, maybe not so much. We pick up, we kind of have a couple of scenes with Tosca and Alan Rowe. Again, this is a brief sort of shot of it. This is when he's talking about going into that housing bubble, and I think I can help you there, Terry. The wonderful bit where they come back to the flat there, the late great Peter Vaughan there, and Frida Dowie, who played Florrie, is just a phenomenal actress as well.
She's got that like what is her regional accent? Because I like that one. It almost sounds like Scottish. It's like almost like a mixture kind of.
I met her. She came to see a play of mine, and I'm trying to remember. And I didn't know it was her until after she left, and I didn't recognize her. She was married 3 times.
Frida, what was her name?
Frida Dowie. She was raised in she was born in Carlisle, Cumbria. So up north enough.
Okay.
Not quite the same region as Newcastle, but not far off.
Yeah, I liked her accent. It kind of like sounded like almost like a combo accent. Like it sounded like at portions. I was like, she kind of sounded a little like Scottish or Irish. I was like, that's interesting. That's an interesting accent.
I mean, bless her. She was married 3 times, and I mean, to get divorced in 1952 would be a big scandal back then. And
the definition of insanity: keep trying the same thing over and over again, hoping for different results.
The last time she got married was in got married was in 1970, and to filmmaker and artist and filmmaker David Thompson, and they stayed married until his death. So that's nice.
Okay.
So
then she wasn't insane. She actually did get the opposite outcome.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you read her Wikipedia, known for playing long-suffering roles, notably the mother in the 1988 film Distant Voices, Still Lies. I remember.
Sometimes you get typecast in like weird ways, like
She was in the original Omen movie.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that. I think in the last episode that we did this. Yeah, I think you.
Yeah, I mean, just phenomenal actress. So, other things that happen of note in this episode is Nikki and Florrie end up putting Felix in a home. She can't cope with him anymore because he actually attacks Florrie at one point in their flat. He loses it and he actually hits her, and he's shouting for his dad and.
It's almost like he's back to like being a kid and he doesn't know who this woman is, and he obviously doesn't know he's a full grown man. Now he's older, but still, like, you have more weight behind it. Like if like a 5-year-old swings randomly, it'll hurt, but it's not gonna. But like a full grown man swings randomly at a small woman, it's gonna.
Yeah, and she is quite small. She's very very petite.
Yes, she's
in
very
life.
small, especially. You see like Christopher Eccleston and Mark Strong on the are like pretty big dudes. You see her next to them, and it's like she's. Well,
Anthony chases Chris Collins into the estate. This is there's rumors that he's got a gun, and this because I think a shot's fired, so they have to go in. You learn that he's got a 5-year-old son, which actually means that Chris Collins had that son when he was 13, by the way.
Yeah.
Not unheard of, I'm afraid.
Not unheard of here either.
No, and it cuts to his flat and it shows the young girlfriend with the son, and the girlfriend saying, I've had it, I'm going out of here.
It turns out it's not actually a real gun, too. I think he says it's a pop gun. So it's like it's a realistic looking replica pop gun is actually what he has.
Yeah.
Which just goes to show you that he's like clearly not mentally sound. It's like at any literally he's provoking the police for no reason with something that he could easily just throw away and be like, it wasn't real.
Yeah. I think I mean his character's completely lost. We find out more about him in the last episode, which we'll come on to shortly. Tosca and Elaine have a massive fight, and she says she wants a partnership with him, in life as well as love.
You and me were messaging back and forth while I was watching that scene, and she throws a lot of shit at him.
It's a really good scene. I mean, again, Tracy Wilkinson, fantastic actress. So
she really sells it. She really sells the disgruntled wife.
And it's funny because she convinces him he wants to buy a couple of pubs and get into karaoke, which by the way was a big craze back then, and a lot of people were doing it. And
and then it became a big craze in the 90s in the United States. It's that Western motion that we were talking about.
And she doesn't get it, and she thinks it's Tosca chasing his dream of being a pop star in another way, and she's not entirely wrong about that.
But she convinces him to go with stocks and bonds and shares and all that stuff.
Just in
more
time,
traditional.
Just in time for the market crash.
That's a fantastic scene, by the way.
Because they're pretty comfortable. They've got a nice house. They're doing They're doing okay. They've got a bit of money put away. It's established by now.
Yeah, like I said, they're pretty much like what I would call upper middle class, like teetering on that upper class range, but not quite there.
Yeah, and she doesn't want him to be a slum landlord.
Once she gets wind of what the actual process was going to be, which is that you basically are stealing from the government. You're giving a loan to somebody who cannot pay it, to buy something that is now effectively taken from the government. It's a little different than the subprime mortgage bubble of the United States, but it's because we don't have the exact same system as you guys. But they're going to buy the houses, and then with the money that is loaned to them by Tosker and Alan Rowe, and then now effectively, if they default on their loans, they can seize the property that was purchased off the government. It's basically a big money laundering scam.
Yeah,
and property laundering scam.
And at the same time, there's a great scene between Eddie and Nikki where they clash over Eddie's behavior. And I think at that point, it's the moment for Nikki where he realizes kind of any kind of career in politics is futile. It doesn't achieve anything realistically.
And we skipped probably the most important thing that happens in the episode, actually.
I haven't covered it all yet. I've got I haven't got to the end yet. Big list here.
No. I was going to say what happened with Jordy because that was a little bit earlier in the episode with the fire.
Oh God, yeah. So
because that was actually earlier in the episode. We were about to get to where it actually.
Yeah, he's in kind of a halfway house, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And
it's like a group living facility.
He sees
Eddie Wells,
someone on the TV.
It was Eddie. So Eddie's giving a speech about how we need to basically the whole
light
system
a fire
is a powder
under the
keg.
masses.
Yeah, it's a powder keg, and we just need to light a match and light it on fire. And he perceives that because it's his friend. Even the guy's trying to turn on the Premier League channel or something, like the Premier League standings, and he's like, no, that's my mate, I know him. And then he goes and sets his bed on fire,
and ends up getting life in prison,
which was very insane, might I add.
That did happen to somebody who was mentally unwell, and they set fire to something. They ended up getting a very hefty prison sentence. I remember that was a bit of a story. In the end, they did get out a lot earlier. But Nikki and Mary's marriage, she kind of suspects now that he is having an affair. He's very cold. Their romance is dying.
And he's always and she's actually questioned Eddie as to whether, because he always says, "Oh, I'm up there helping Eddie. I'm up there helping Eddie," or down there helping Eddie. And so she has questioned Eddie as to whether or not he actually is, and he's like, "Yeah, but not really," Yeah.
I think they've got a scene where they go for a walk by the sea because Nikki's taken his mum for a walk, and then there's a line. It's more important than ever to. I think Mary says it's more important than ever to fight for what you believe in. This is when Mary knows that they're done because their attitudes have changed dramatically. They don't agree on the same thing anymore. And then he goes back to London and he kind of drops into the local pub of Alice where she's with all her young mates.
Yeah.
That scene is horrendous.
That scene is awkward.
Oh man, I've actually been in a situation like that, not under entirely the same circumstances, but I've been in a very similar situation like that when you kind of get to a point where you go, shall I go then? Yeah, that'd probably be best. I'll get my coat. Is always the line. And
historically in my life, I've never been able to pick up on that social cue that I should leave, and I just keep talking.
Right.
Which, has affected me on streams before too. So
I think if you keep going with your YouTube channel long enough, I'm sure that event will naturally occur.
Yes. Yeah, probably. But yeah, it's
she's a real bitch though, that Alice. I kind of hated her in that moment.
So here's the thing is, and I wasn't 100% on this because it is a minor portion of the greater arc of the storyline.
Yeah, no, go on.
It's kind of implied that she was in a relationship with the one guy and was also cheating on him.
Yep.
Because this isn't a long period of time.
No,
this is only maybe a couple of days.
This all takes place within, the beginning and end of their affair, I would say, takes place over a period of about 6 months, probably.
Yeah. So it wasn't, but I'm saying like the last time they spoke, Alice and him versus this is probably a week, 2 weeks since then.
Yeah.
So it's kind of implied that she was sort of cheating on her boyfriend and that's one of the reasons why she wasn't blowing him up. You know, because she knew he was married. So like she had says that. And so it was kind of like I think to me it seemed like it was a mutual thing that he was kind of unaware of that portion of it at least. And and I
actually had the notes about Jordy setting fire, all that just here. So maybe
if I jumped out ahead. I just felt like that was I thought we skipped it.
I think the scene did come after this, but anyway, the important thing, one of the things that I made a note of is when the prison guard turns around and says, "I didn't know you could get life for setting fire to your bed." If you remember that guy, that's an actor called David Shaw, who plays one of the dads in the TV show The In-Betweeners. He's a very good friend of mine. Lives literally 5 minutes away from me.
The name sounds super familiar. Like I might know him from something else too.
He's done a lot of stuff. I'll get a picture of him up in a sec. He's a really good actor. He plays kind of a lot of dad roles, but he's also done a couple of very cool low budget indie films, one of which is called Down Terrace, which is a kind of very sort of gritty, almost kind of Animal Kingdom-esque type drama.
I'm just looking at his IMDb right now.
Yeah.
He's in the IT crowd. Okay, so that, I might know him from that.
He's done a lot of stuff. Well, hopefully, I have talked to him about coming on and doing an interview at some point. Incredible range of projects and stuff that he's done. He'd be a great guest. But yeah, he's got a little that he's the prison guard in that scene. After Jordy goes down, it's awful because Jordy has like one bad thing happen to him after another, and now he's going to prison for the rest of his life. And then you got it's just after that Nikki goes to reconnect with Alison, and he's also looking out for Jordy again. Can't find him. Tosca then is with Elaine, and they see the news story about the shares going down the toilet, the stock market crash of 87. Loads of people lost lots of money, and she's like going, "Oh shit!" And
it's my fault.
And then the phone rings, and it's Alan Rowe. And I do love this bit with Oscar. He picks up the phone, and he puts it and
he hangs it up.
He says to her, "Pick up the phone now, put it down again." And then he just turns to her and says, "We're going to sell this house. We're going to buy a couple of pubs." And, and he's got a plan already.
Which is the plan that he originally wanted to do. Yeah. And now it's become so originally it was the like next level of him having, now it's become the only thing he has left, essentially. What was his next venture is now his last ditch effort.
So we're kind of coming up to the end of episode 8, which ends with the big storm of 87.
Yes.
Which I lived through. It was massive. I mean, it knocked out the power of the entire country. And I remember
it seems like it was very similar. So I lived through Superstorm Sandy. Actually, the town I'm from is right across the water. I don't live there anymore, but it's right across the water from Staten Island, New York.
Right.
And that was where the eye of the storm whipped around and hit. And there was like literally there was people died like right there, and they were washing up on shore for the New York Marathon. It was some of the worst stuff you've ever seen in terms of like so if it's anything like that, which it seems like it was, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But and the funny thing is Michael Fish, who was a very well-known weatherman, and they've got this clip of him in the show, and he actually says on the weather forecast, and, we've had a call from a woman who says she's heard there's a big storm coming. Well, just to tell you, there isn't. And he actually says that on this clip.
I think if you could actually play, I think you could play this. It wouldn't.
I don't know if you can hear the audio. Can you hear the audio?
Nah, I can't, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It was it was right there, I think, is where he said it. But yeah, he does say it very like matter of fact too. It's like we've received a call from a woman who says there's a large storm coming. There isn't. And it's like, it's just very like matter of fact. Like, don't worry, this is fine. You're gonna be good.
I mean, it's interesting. I don't think wind's even mentioned. Oh, windy in France.
It's funny watching these like old weather like report styles. Like, you know, nowadays it's like all Doppler radar and like, you know, like really detailed, like, oh, here the clouds are moving exactly like this, and here it's all like hand drawn stuff. It's like they might as well have like a map with like a marker.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I mean, God, he got lambasted for that. Hey, Desert Phoenix, good to see you, man. Because yeah, you know, he basically said there isn't a big storm coming. But of course there was, and I mean, it felled so many trees. Me and a load of friends got hacksaws and things, and we went out in a car and we started helping to clear trees that had fallen to block the roads. And I'll never forget it. It was like people kept coming out of their houses going, "Are you from the council?" And we were like, "No, we just," because they did put a national call out for people to assist, you know.
Yeah,
and
people would come out.
People would come out and they'd have a moan at us for you know, helping. And we were just like, no, we're just trying to, you know, clear the wreckage. Oh, don't think you should be doing that. This is what the fuck. So you know, national emergency. Hello. But anyway, you know, I guess you can't. There's no pleasing some people. But yeah, that storm was. I'll never forget that howling wind battering against the windows of our house. I mean, it was scary. And it's funny because Jordy's being taken to prison and all the prisoners manage to escape when the prison van gets stuck.
Yeah. And he's like running. He's like running through the fields.
Yeah, and it's really severe. And he realizes he doesn't have anywhere to go, so he comes back into the. It just comes back into the van.
It's like the most like he's like pretty far away, which is weird because there's 4 guys in the van and 3 of them run straight down the road, and he kind of like follows slowly, and goes to the left of like screen left, and he just kind of runs onto like the beach. It looks like it's like through the woods and onto the beach, and he's like running. He's got his hands in the air with like his handcuffs, and then it's like a moment of realization. He's just like, the fuck am I doing? I have like, where would I run to? Like he's just gonna end up running around the streets with handcuffs. He's gonna get caught again anyway, so he just goes back.
Then we cut briefly to the actual home that Peter Vaughan's character is in.
Yes.
And you know, he's like sitting in a group in the home that he's now in, which is really sad. And there's a nurse leading them in a sing-song to keep them all calm, because they all would have been woken up. So that the best thing to do is put them all together in the room and keep them calm. Now, the nurse who's leading that sing-song is the actress Angela Bruce. She's been in Doctor Who, and goes back as far as Blake 7 and various other roles, and is an actress that I really rate. And I'll never forget that the day that my grandmother passed away, we went and had dinner in this pub on top of Epsom Downs, me and a friend of mine. And who was the waitress that was serving me was Angela Bruce. And I recognized her straight away. And I was like, "You're that actress that was in Blake 7. And she kind of, you know, she kind of was annoyed that I recognized her. And I'm like, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "Well, you know, got to earn a crust in between jobs." And she's a great actress. She's really good. So she pops up in that scene. Eddie's leaving the Houses of Parliament. He tries to hail a taxi. And then like all his case opens, doesn't it? All his papers go.
Yeah, because he like effectively resigned because we missed the one detail that.
Oh yeah, about the Colin Butler screwed him over.
Yeah, so like Colin Butler had put a plant in his like a plant member of his staff who's the actress I looked up, and I found out that she was in British politics now, and which is ironic because I don't think I'm fairly certain she's
Do you remember
American.
the actress's name?
No, I don't remember the actress's
All right,
name.
I'll have a quick look through the 166 acting credits. Can cover that.
But yeah,
storyline.
basically Nikki was going to like try to have her convince Eddie to like try to do a little bit more and like try to go a different route, and then he realizes that not only is she planted there by Butler, she's also sleeping with Butler, so like she's really entrenched with this organization.
Yeah.
And he immediately goes and like it's the same day as a disposition, I believe, with Parliament, and all the information is now useless because everything that he has that he's going to question, bring up, all these things in this like situation were provided for him by someone who's a plant by the opposing side, so he can't say anything,
and it's
it kind of ruins him
because she's a researcher that's employed by Parliament. There's some kind of rule which means that I think he would be self-incriminating himself.
Mm-hmm. It's basically even if he wasn't, he has no way of trusting the information that she has given, and so he just stands down, which is sort of an embarrassment because he has up to this point he's kind of set himself up like this is going to be my big moment, like this is going to be the thing that gets me back in the game, and then they defer to him and he just goes, yeah, I got nothing, and it kind of embarrasses him and it forces him to resign.
Yeah, I think by then he's done, and then
this was his last like thing that could have possibly saved his political career, but he was basically done anyway. And then now he has resigned. He takes all of his papers, and he's where we just were, where you were saying.
So you're right about the actress who played Francine. It's Joanna McInnes.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, and also known as Joanne McQuinn. She's now involved in human rights politics, founder director of West London Welcome, co-founder of We Stand with Shakira. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, but I couldn't find if she was actually from England or
I think probably.
So that she probably one of two things: either she was from England and spent a lot of time in the United States and sort of lost her accent before doing this, or she was really good, which is weird because she was such a like limited actress in terms of her credits. That she was really good at doing an American accent because she has like zero trace of a British accent.
Yeah, I mean, I guess she could have been. It could have been like maybe she had American parents, or she could have been one of those people that was educated in the private schools where everybody's American, that kind of thing. Here's a more recent picture of her. There we go.
She looks pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I looked her up because I was like, she's pretty cute. I wonder where what else I can see her in.
There's always that curiosity, isn't there? About
and it turned out she was barely in anything. She was in like 4 things. If you look at her IMDb,
she did 5 things. I mean, she may, of course, IMDb does not cover theater.
That's a possibility.
She may well have done a lot more in that realm. Who's to know? But I mean, it seems to me that she's, it sounds to me like she's heavily involved in quite a number of fairly respectful projects, bringing things to the attention, like, London doesn't have enough hospital beds, which certainly became.
It's fun, and that's what I was saying. The irony of the fact that she was on the opposite side of that in the show. She was on the side that is kind of like trying to bury the stuff, and then in real life, she's the exact opposite of what she was being in the show. That's why I said it was kind of interesting.
She'd be an interesting guest to get on the channel, especially with the stuff she's doing now. I might reach out to her, see if she'd be prepared to come on and chat about her time on the show, and also talk about the things she's up to. That could be interesting. So I guess the episode ends with Eddie basically dying of a heart attack outside of Parliament. I think there's isn't there also a big tumultuous fallout between Mary and Nikki as well at the end?
Yes, she basically, they don't say it. There's no actual wording for it, but she knows the jig is up. She knows that he's not. They never say specifically like, "Oh, are you having an affair?" She's just like, "What is wrong?" Like she basically keeps probing him to kind of tell her what she already knows. And instead of telling her what she really wants to know, he just says to her, "I'm useless," parroting what his father said.
Yeah,
I've always been useless.
Which is, I mean, yeah, and that really impacted him, and I can relate to that because when I met my real mother for the first time, she as good as much said the same thing to me, and I didn't realize just how much that had affected me, and until many years later. And you kind of go back and you look at things and you think, oh shit, yeah, now I understand sort of, why my confidence took a big knock and this and this. And yeah, you do, these things do impact you, especially if it's a parent. Admittedly, not one I was particularly connected to, but yeah. So, okay. So that takes us into episode 9, which is good because we're coming up to the 2-hour mark. So we'll try and wrap this up relatively quickly, although this is great talking about the show because I do love it. So episode 9 is a bit different in a lot of ways. It opens with a voiceover from Frida Dowie again, and the voiceover is actually one of the last letters that she wrote to Nikki, her son, while she was still alive. Here's Frida Dowie again from The Omen this time. And she has traveled all over Europe. She went to Rome because her religion was very important to her.
Yeah, they're very devout Catholic family is kind
and
of
then she's also
theme.
encouraging him to, she says that she's recently bumped into Mary, who we can tell from her letter that Nikki hasn't seen for a number of years now. And she says, I can tell when she talks about you, there's a bit of light in her eyes. And she's encouraging her son to reunite with Mary before it's too late. And then of course we learn that actually Florrie has died and Nikki is
was a little weird, might I add, because they show a picture of they show a clip of her walking and it like threw me off. I was like, wait a minute, is she actually dead? Because they just showed her walking like for a second. Like, yeah,
that's, I mean, I think that's a deliberate curveball. We see her kind of making her last journey before I think she passed away. Maybe that's her last journey to post that letter or
possibly.
But then the next thing is Nikki's meeting with the priest, isn't he, to discuss the arrangements. And he's kind of on autopilot because until the funeral, he doesn't let it out. Until the funeral. And then
I can kind of attest to that. When my father died, I was kind of like that. Because I actually gave the eulogy at my father's funeral. Well, it was his wake, but I gave the eulogy, and it didn't really hit me till day of in the church. I remember, like I was able to keep my composure, and like then like it hit, bam! It was like switch flipped, and everything happened at once. So that scene actually really got to me. It was.
Yeah, I can, mate. I did one of the speeches at my dad's, so I completely relate to that. And you got that great scene where Nikki walks past Jordy, putting his chips in the bin, but he doesn't see Jordy. And Jordy then goes and
oh, that was Nikki who did that?
I think well, he's certainly nearby. I don't remember whether it's him that puts the chips in the bin, but he's nearby.
And fries in the trash for the American audience.
Yeah, fries in the trash, and of course Jordy is hungry. He's kind of still homeless. He takes the fries from the trash bin. So
you can say chips in the bin. I'm here to do the translating for the American audience. Remember that.
And then we see Christopher Collins's son, who was the 5-year-old that's mentioned in the previous episode, and who they kind of have a really nice little scene together, and they make a joke about torpedoing Tosca's boat.
Yes,
Tosca's now that boat, by the way, in Newcastle, which is no longer there, was a nightclub for a really long time. It was quite an iconic place, and at the time when They used it for filming. It was still a club, you know, but it had a fire broke out on it not that long ago, and it
looked like a pretty cool place though. Like I was like looking at it, I was like, that'd be a cool thing to like if you because from the upper visuals you can see it had like restaurant tables and stuff. Like that'd be a pretty cool restaurant. Like you're sitting on a boat in port.
Yeah,
like,
it was a club and a restaurant and a bar, and it was available for weddings, and it was a big thing, and it was moored there for forever. But I believe it's gone now. It's got a massive Wikipedia page on it. You can read the whole history of it.
I'll check that out later.
But there's a quite funny scene because Jordy talks to the little kid. And you want to see what that little kid looks like now. I'll find you a picture of him.
Sure, yeah.
And then he tries to get some money off Jordy, but realizes he doesn't have any, and threatening him. Jordy's not scared of him at all. And then the kid just goes off, immediately breaks into a car and races off with it.
So yeah, because he's trying to like threaten him, but he's like, I just got out of prison. I broke out of prison. I'm not afraid of you. And yeah, I found that hilarious, might I add. So he like jimmies the door open like old school style, where he has like the it's like almost like a small pry bar that you would cram down, and you can't really do that with cars anymore because they're all electronic locks.
You saw them do it in that film No Man's Land with Charlie Sheen, which is a great little movie actually.
Yeah, but you used to be able to if you got a small enough shim, you could go down in the window and pop the door lock. And but the thing that didn't make any sense to me is he jumps in and immediately starts the car, which implies that the people locked the keys in the car.
Well, he could have hotwired the car.
I mean, but it was so fast. Like literally, it's like bam, and then it's like he starts it and goes. Like it would have taken a while to hotwire. It may have just been a thing for time purposes, but it sort of implies that these people had locked their keys in their car, and he just actually unlocked. He just happened to find the car that was like that. It was like a interesting little thing.
So I mean, we then learn like Nikki's visiting his dad Felix in a home, and it's a really awful scene. Felix is basically getting his nappy changed. For him, you know, I mean, my biggest fear in life is ending up in a care home like that, man. That's the worst, and they're terrible over here as well. They're, you know,
here they vary. It depends here.
My dad's one was okay, but I mean, God, it was a depressing place, and you know, that for me, that's my big fear. I would hate to end up in that situation. So, and my dad went through that. And, you know, I remember the carers and things having to do this kind of stuff with him. And it was fucking heartbreaking. So that scene was, but we learn that Nikki now lives in Italy. And that there's occasional glimmers with Felix, but basically he doesn't have a consistent memory anymore. Mary's now got grandkids. We have a scene with her and Anthony, because Anthony's been chasing after Sean Collins, who's the son of the one we saw break into the car. And now Anthony's marriage is going the same way hers did. He's talking about getting a divorce. He's smoking. He's stressed.
Which might I add, you brought up the smoke, that this I know that there's like a website or something that's like that like specializes in like how much smoking is in something. This has got to be up there. Everybody throughout the whole show, like, which makes sense. I mean, for the time, up from like, you know, the 60s, 70s all the way up to the 90s, you know, it's like wasn't until like the late 90s that it started to, and it's also the UK.
You're talking about people that grew up in working class neighborhoods and working men's clubs, and then the flip side of that is you've also got that whole political environment of people in the you know, the political
cigar rooms and stuff.
And that smoking was part of that culture. So
there was also like, so it's weirder to see that in the United States, like when I'm watching it from an external point of view, because that was one thing. So a lot health wise, we were behind a lot of other countries, but that was one thing we were at the forefront of, really pushing anti-smoking campaigns.
Right.
So like by you know, standards of what I'm used to seeing in life now, especially, it's jarring from like a societal like view to see that kind of thing. It's like, because we've over the course of time, the United States has slowly but surely removed it more and more.
Yeah, I mean, almost no one smokes over here now, and the funny thing is that the people that I know that do are my older friends who are so stressed that they've gone back to smoking again.
Yeah.
There's like one friend of mine that I went to school with. You know, he came out for my birthday, and I was thinking, where is he? At one point, and I'm sort of looking for him, thinking he can't have gone yet because that would have been a bit rude. He's upstairs having a fag outside, as we say in the UK.
You just got demonetized by accident right there.
Oh yeah, that doesn't mean the same thing in the UK. Having a fag,
I know it doesn't mean. I'm just saying you gotta.
So,
but yeah, no, yeah, I guess the UK is probably a little bit more. So I know that a lot of European countries, France, Italy, it's like way more prevalent. But it was just something. It's like seeing that in something always kind of offset, because you don't see it in American stuff anymore. Like even like period pieces, you just don't see it. And
true.
So it was a little weird. I got used to it after a few episodes, but those first few episodes, I was like, another. Like what's like everybody.
I mean, it's good that it's in there because it's
accurate. It
gives it more realism. Yeah, it feels real. It feels of its time, and it represents the time accurately. You know, basically. So okay, so then we've got Felix and Nikki's storyline. Let's work through those scenes quickly. I'll skip a couple of other things. So there's the scene where he has to help him to eat his food and cut it up for him, and he's eating it really fast. My dad did that, and I used to have to. And in fact, how my father died was he choked on his food at the nursing home because he ate it too quickly. And you know, and I used to have to tell him to slow down, and I would take him out for lunch. And I took him out for lunch the day before he died. So I literally just got back home when I got the phone call, you know, that he'd been rushed to hospital. And I was like, shit. And I was just only been back a few hours, and then I'm all the way back again.
It was so you took him out to lunch and it was a dinner?
I took him out for lunch, and then and he was in South London. I got back to North London. And then, you know, got the call that he was. So I'd already seen him that day, and then I had to come rushing all the way back again. And yeah, it was. You know, these scenes again. He had dementia, so all of this stuff was really fucking hard. But the one difference was, if I sat down my dad and I talked to him about something, and I said, "Dad, do you remember blah blah?" He would automatically. There would a light would go on, and he would suddenly be himself. It wouldn't last very long, but
so he was at a different phase of it. So
I could have a conversation with him, and I go down and see him quite regularly, about twice a month. And the more regular I went, the more he was there. You know, if I left it a long time, I could. It was so I kept going more.
I'm a bit ignorant on the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia. I know that they act similar, but they're not the same.
Yeah,
I believe his father in the show has Alzheimer's.
Right. It may well be. I mean, it could be a bit of both.
Yeah,
but it's.
I know that they're similar, but they're not the same.
Right.
Like I think that. I could be wrong on this, but I believe that dementia can't kill you by itself, but Alzheimer's can.
Well, we'll get into it on the Dark Hour medical stream.
Okay, I'm just saying, like I think that there's something like that. It's like the residual, like the dementia, like Alzheimer's actually like eats away at the brain, I believe.
Yeah.
Versus dementia, which is more like your brain is still intact, but it's not working properly, I think. I don't want to get too bogged down in that, but
no, all right. Well, when from this scene, we cut to Mary at a kind of town meeting with various local officials, where they're there to meet about Sean Collins, Chris Collins' son, who basically is a one-man criminal crime wave. He's constantly nicking and stealing cars and doing everything.
Yeah, and he carries weapons on him and threatens people with them, and yeah.
And Anthony just like picks a fight with his mother, not entirely justifiably, and storms out of the meeting. You know, then we've got a brief subplot with Tosca and Elaine trying to get the boat ready for the opening night of the boat in his new venue, and they bump into Jordy, who's meets Elaine and is asking for a job, and Elaine actually recognizes him.
At first she doesn't, but then as they talk more, she realizes who it is.
She goes, "Is it Jordy?" And yeah, because of course on the night that Tosca met Elaine, Jordy was there. Which is difficult to remember by this time because it's like way earlier in the show.
It's been like 10 years probably or more.
So it's well played that scene, and then Jordy reconnects with them, and
also he looks different. Don't forget, he also looks significantly different now.
Well, so. he looks like this now, you know.
Yeah, the hair is still long, but he's got glasses. He's unkempt in his face. Like he looks like he's been through hell. You know, like he ages the most from episode to episode.
And Tosca and Nikki look like this now.
Yeah. Like Tosca probably, even though he's balding, probably ages the least in his face. Like they don't really age up his face very much.
I think, and that's because he's kind of had a relatively healthy lifestyle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nikki is definitely the most grayed out one. His hair is graying faster than the rest of them, and that's probably because of the stress level of his lifestyle and job and all that.
Thanks, James Willard. Appreciate. Yeah, this show was in the 90s, but it's definitely worth.
I would suggest it. You know, as an American who had no idea what was going on with this, you know, it can be a little rough at certain patches, but it's a very well acted set of films. I would even call it. It's not even really a show.
Yeah.
But like I was saying, like, and Jordy definitely has like the most like his face looks roughed up.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he's been punched a lot. He went to prison. He probably got into a lot of fights in prison. You know, he was living as a homeless guy for a long time. So he's probably been exposed to the elements a lot more. So they did a really good job with the way that they aged them all up.
So the makeup is fantastic. It's in this last episode. Then we have Anthony and Nikki briefly meet in the pub. There's a reason for their meeting. I can't remember entirely what it is, but
I remember. It was Anthony tells Nikki to just stay away from his mom. Like,
well, that's not the reason that they meet. That's the outcome of the meeting. In fact, his exact line is, "You broke my mother's heart." And you know, but they meet up initially about something else, which I think is connected to Sean Collins again,
probably.
But yeah, and he kind of draws a line with him. Mary and Nikki speak to each other on the phone, find out they've both been invited to Tosca's big opening night. Elaine checks on Jordy to find, you know, he's like sleeping on the floor because Tosca's got a big house. Wait till you see the place. It's like 6 bedrooms and so he's done really well. That's
actually pretty common for people who come out of prison too, because they actually find it difficult to sleep in comfortable beds because they're so used to like bad mattresses, hard mattresses.
Yeah.
That being in a soft one kind of like it like jars them in a way. So a lot of times they will sleep on the floor, at least initially.
They do that. It's like Tom Hanks does that at the end of Castaway, doesn't he?
Yes, it's very similar. It's like you get so used to a certain way of sleeping that your body can't really adjust immediately.
Yeah. So then probably one of the most important scenes and messages of the whole show is coming up now. And we continue the plot with Felix and Nikki because Felix is being taken out for the day. And Nikki suddenly has a brainwave and he remembers something that he read in a letter. He takes Felix to a village in Yorkshire where the Jarrow marchers, who Felix took part in with his dad, marching down to London to protest against the lack of employment in Jarrow. They stopped off at this village. And in this letter, that had been written to Nikki, because Nikki's he's quite a famous photographer now. He's received letters from all over the world. One person that wrote to him said this thing about the Gyro March and mentioned this young boy, and he realizes the young boy that she's talking about in the letter is Felix.
Yeah.
And he's obviously spoken to the woman a bit before this meeting takes place, but the point is that the woman remembers that her father always talked about the Gyro Marchers, and even though the Gyro March didn't achieve anything for the Gyro Marchers, it impacted her father and the way her father thought about things, because he was so impressed that they did what they did and walked all the way to London to demand work and so on, that it impacted him, which changed his life. So what Nikki is trying to convey to his dad is, look, the Gyro March wasn't a waste of time. See, it impacted people. It did, in fact, create change. It affected people in ways that you didn't even realize. And he tries to get the woman to tell his dad that, but the dad's dementia is or whichever it is, Alzheimer's, is so far gone he can't quite connect. But I also think that there's a part of Felix which is he's quite spiteful, and so sometimes it might be that his spitefulness is he deliberately doesn't want to hear it. It's difficult to know, because then how that scene ends is,
the dynamic between him and Nikki is just so it's hard to explain, because he doesn't. It's broken, but in a different way than we've seen with other broken relationships.
Yeah.
It's almost like a disappointment broken. It's a like never living up to what you wanted, what your parent wanted broken. Whereas like the other ones were more marriage or like marriage breaking kind of thing. That didn't happen in Nikki's life. He actually had a great relationship with his mother and a terrible relationship with his father, which is probably the worst thing that can happen to you as a mentally. Because you're getting like essentially two sides of the same coin. It's like, oh, this is my refuge, and then I have to, but it's intrinsically connected to my source of stress and problems. So it's like, it's almost better if you hate both your parents at that point, because it's like you're being like almost like pulled. The thing that you want is actually being pulled away from you by the other side.
Yeah, and you got that really great moment where he gets the woman to sing the song, hoping that Felix will connect with it, and he keeps joining in with "It's a Long Way to Tipperary," which is a song from his time, but isn't connected to that event. But the woman has a line which she said that her dad said to her, which for me is the core message of the show, if there is a message. And it's that you can be downtrodden, or you can stand up for yourself. And then he says, "See, Dad, your life was not a failure, because you convert." That was the impact that the Gyro March had on people who met and saw the marchers. But it's too late for his dad to absorb that message. And then, of course, there's the bit where then Felix craps himself.
Yeah, that was.
And Nikki's like, "Can we use your loo, please?" And then the next shot is cuts to the car, and he's going, "You're a bastard, Dad. You're a bastard, and you always were a bastard." And you're not sure if he's done that deliberately to embarrass him, or if Nikki just thinks that, or if he's just angry. But it's all, he's tried to have this last connecting moment with his dad, and it's failed. But the core message of the play is still in that, or the show is still in that scene. You can be downtrodden, or you can stand up for yourself, whether it's to do with politics or personal life or whatever. And that for me was that's the core of the show. That message. Do you want to say anything else about that scene before we?
No, you pretty much nailed that. I got nothing really to add to that.
So Tosca and Elaine we cut back to them. They're hoping to have Jordy there.
Yeah, because Jordy shows that he's still very musically inclined,
very musically talented. But he's supposed to be playing the the keyboards because
with the what are the artificial animals or whatever,
the original animals or the new animals or something who are a cover band for the actual animals, and they don't really look that much like them, but they actually kind of want to cancel the gig at one point. They've got a line saying, "Can we not cancel?" And Tosca's like, "No, we cannot."
My favorite thing is that they go, "Wait, there's 5 in the band," and then he goes, "Yeah, the other one's in hospital." Did you hear me say that? But the guy never comes back, so like they're just replacing a band member. It's like
yeah. And so Tosca's like, "Okay, well, you know."
First, they try with Tosker, and he's really out of practice with music. Yeah. Like he hasn't done it for a very long time. You know, he's been doing business stuff for 20 plus years, and you know, like the keyboard, which is effectively like an electronic piano, is one of the harder ones to like go away from and come back. And he sucks. He's lost his like skills basically, but somehow Jordy didn't, despite being in prison. And
so the reason that Jordy doesn't make the opening night of the club is because he bumps into Nikki in a pub, and Nikki's like, "You didn't die then." And
I think Jordy's it's the same pub from like earlier in the show, like the first episode. Yeah,
no, it is. And Jordy's got a great response to that. He goes, "Nah, but I tried my best." And then he says, "Shall we have a drink on Flory?" And you kind of know that Jordy's an alcoholic, so he's going to get trolleyed. Yeah. So then he's still in the pub after Nikki's left. Sean Collins comes in to speak to his dad, the actor playing his dad, Chris Collins. Chris Collins is now kind of he's some sort of low-end criminal come business.
Yeah, it seemed like he was some sort of he would just engage in petty crime basically. And
probably got a few deals going on. He may even have a respectable business. What he doesn't have is time for his son.
Yeah,
and Jordy witnesses it, and it's a mirror of his own relationship between him and his father. And the father just gives him money to get him to go away, and he's like, he doesn't want money, man. You just talk to him, which results in Jordy getting headbutted, and then the security don't let him into Tosca's party because it was a
good headbutt too. It was a good Zinedine Zidane would be proud kind of headbutt, you know.
So in the club, Tosca arrives. Tosca performs. Nikki arrives. There's no Mary, but which is funny because Nikki and Tosca are not great mates really, but
they have like a love-hate relationship.
Yeah,
like, they want to be friends, but they just are intrinsic, like they're just like at their cores they're so different, and they just can't overcome that.
I like the fact that Elaine, Tracy Wilkinson's character, in this moment when it seems like the band can't perform, she supports him, goes, go and do your dream, what you always wanted to do, to perform. And he sort of suddenly gets his confidence back. It's a lovely moment. And then of course the song that they go to sing is "We Gotta Get Out of This Place," which is kind of funny, you know, like, so the characters are all ended up back where they started, but they really should have got away. But I like that. The reason Mary's not there is she's having a big argument with her son because her son has told her he's leaving his wife. And he says exactly the same thing she said to Tosca. I was too young, and I got married too young, and it's mirroring her own past.
Yeah, and it's very much the, like, you know, you're influenced by what you see.
Yeah, and he kind of blames her in a way, which I think is a bit unfair. But you know, so then Sean Collins, having briefly seen Jordy again, goes joyriding. Everybody's chasing after him, and unfortunately, he crashes the car. He dies.
I think he does it on purpose.
Yeah,
it looks like he like sees the wall and then just goes, nope.
No, that's right. Yeah, he wants to check out because his father won't connect with him.
Also, one thing that was Anthony's last scene in the show, by the way. Him basically walking out on the mother.
Yeah.
So it's
we don't see him. Oh, I think we might see him with the kids in the funeral. I think he's at the funeral.
No, he doesn't show up.
Is he not?
He doesn't show up. They specifically say he doesn't show up.
Oh, okay. Right. Nerdly UK, thanks for popping in the chat, buddy. And yeah, it was an amazing cast, an amazing show too.
And
Dave
I mean,
from Desolate Studios as well.
I would say that, like, whatever your guys' equivalency of like the Emmys was, I hope that some people won some awards for this.
Oh, Gina McKee won a BAFTA.
That's it. BAFTAs. Yeah, that's
Best Actress. Yeah, she won a BAFTA. I'll actually we'll do a bit of trivia at the end to wrap up. I haven't got a funny whirly trivia sign to come up with my face on it, but I'll see if I can get.
We'll work on it. We'll figure it
out. Yeah. So that's that night done. Sean Collins dies. Mary cries at his death because she wanted to prevent it.
Yeah,
and she failed. We're then at Florrie's funeral. Nikki stands at the front, crying alone. We realize all of his family are gone. He can't stop crying. He's crying over more than just the death of his mother. It's everything. It's his life. He feels like he's wasted his life. And then suddenly you have that final scene with them all together in the house where Jordy's on the piano. There's Nikki, Mary, Tosca, and Elaine and the kids. Then Elaine and Tosca leave, but then Tosca comes back in because either he forgot something.
I think he forgot his keys or something.
He forgot something, and then you just have that moment where it's just the four of them.
It was a great. That shot was fantastic.
Yeah, and there's an exchange of glances, and there's no dialogue.
I love dialogue-less lines. Scenes like that.
No,
because
I mean
you don't need it. It tells you everything you need.
So much is said with nothing other than a look, and you know that they kind of looking at each other, and then
if I had to compare it to anything, and it not obviously not thematically, but like stylistically, kind of how they did it was very similar to like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, when they keep it's very similar to that.
Now you then have this kind of. I've got a gripe with the show, and it's this. You then have this kind of scene where
I think you and me have the same gripe.
Yeah, Nikki decides to chase after Mary because it's that if not now, when.
Yeah, which has been one of the running themes.
Yeah, it's chasing down the road after the car and all that. They didn't need that. It could have just been. You could have had that scene with no dialogue.
So, yes, I think it should have ended there.
Well, or she could have gone out. He could have gone out, and they could have had two lines of dialogue there, and it would have been like, "Do you want to go for a drink? Do you want to go for a drink?" And she could have turned around and said, "Yeah, if not now, when?" And that would have been beautiful. We didn't need this whole scene of him running and getting out of breath. I guess they felt the need for.
Yeah, it was kind of it was a little silly.
It was really silly. It felt very out of place, and I kind of felt
it was sort of offset by the final scene of Jordy walking on the bridge alone. But it definitely two great ending scenes that were kind of split by this weird, and like maybe had he ran out and ran into the middle of the street, and she looked up into the rearview mirror and like slammed on her brakes, and it was quicker, but it drew out way too long.
That would have been better. That would have been better.
He got to the end, and he's it looks like he just ran a marathon. He's like, it looks like
I can also tell you that if someone drives off in a car, unless you're in London and it's gridlocked and you're an athlete, you've got no chance of catching up with them once they've gone. Trust me.
It was very convoluted the way he caught up to her.
Yeah,
running through like cutting her off at like a different spot, and I felt like it took like a couple of beautiful moments and made a joke out of it almost.
Yeah, which I agree was a bit.
I actually have a problem with that whole ending of it because they've already married each other, and I almost feel like if they didn't have the marriage storyline breaking up, I feel like it almost ruins that storyline. Almost, not quite, almost. Now, had they been in had they kept kind of crossing paths, and there's
still something between Nikki and Mary. So he takes that as his cue to exit. And it could have, I mean, it could have ended here with the two of them leaving together, and then the shot of Jordy going over the bridge. So that's my one gripe with the show. But look, there's enough stuff about it that's brilliant.
I'll give it a pass because it almost feels like that was like, if this was more modern, if this was like something that came out like now, I would almost say that was studio mandated.
I'm telling you now that that would not have been the choice of one of the directors.
Yeah,
I'm telling you now that definitely had a producer's fingerprints on, and I bet I can guess whose. So okay, so that's our friends in the North. We have done a mega deep dive.
Yeah, we've done about let's see,
analysis.
two and a half each, you know,
Yeah,
and almost 9 hours. We pretty much did like almost as much as the actual episodes.
Yeah, we haven't gone quite at the same length of the entire series, but not far off. It is a fantastic show. We'll cover a couple of little bits of trivia before we call it a night. I'm going to put the Wikipedia page here. Nerdly just mentioned a show with Robert Carlyle. Nerdly, I've seen that show. I thought it was good. I don't know if it's good enough to qualify for Best of British. I'd have to watch it again. I thought it was good when I saw it. I wasn't like wanting to own it or see it again or have it in my collection. Whereas Our Friends in the North, I mean, I videoed this when it first came out, just on the basis that Christopher Eccleston and Mark Strong were both in it, who I'd already seen in other things, you know.
Honestly, I would have to say that, like, since we're talking about the actors sort of right there, Daniel Craig, man, like the fact that he didn't win a BAFTA for this is a crime. Because
I mean, he's amazing in it.
Yeah, like this, I'm not the biggest Daniel Craig guy. Like I didn't like him really as Bond. Other things I've seen him in, he's just kind of there for me. This did it for me. Like he had a range of emotion that was damn near unmatched in anything I've ever seen. Short of like maybe like Sybil or something like that. But the physical acting, everything was just spot on. You know, Mark Strong, fantastic performance. Eccleston, great performance. The character kind of started to grate on me after a while, but that's partially about how he's written. Gina McKee obviously won an award, fantastic. Everybody did really well. There wasn't really anybody who I could say was the weak part of this cast.
No, I mean, even all the supporting cast, right down to the child actors and everything, particularly the kid that played Sean Collins. And by the way, I've been looking for the picture. I can't find it. But he's a big, beefy, built like a brick.
I'm not shocked by that. Not shocked by that.
Yeah,
a lot of child actors go have to do something a little weird toward the end of their, like you have to shake that like child actorness, and a lot of them get big.
So a couple of little tidbits, trivia things. Gina McKee had a makeup test as anyone that got into like the final rounds of casting. They would do a makeup test with the actors to see if it would work. That whoever they cast could also play someone in their 50s, right? And she was concerned, having been given an unsuccessful makeup test that resulted in her resembling a drag queen. She didn't think she was going to be cast because she thought she looked terrible.
Of the four of them, I would say she was the one who aged up the worst. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but she didn't really look her hair just kind of changed as this
gray hair, and they gave her some lines.
But like she never literally looked all that much older to me. It was, I wouldn't even say they grayed her hair. They just changed the style for the most part to be relevant to the time.
Daniel Craig,
which may be connected to what you're talking about right now. Then
well, Daniel Craig actually wanted to play the character of Nikki because he thought he was the more emotionally complex character, and Eccleston was actually quite concerned about being able to perform a Newcastle accent, which he didn't even attempt at his audition, because they were trying to cast people who could do the accent. Craig was cast last. He performed. He did the accent really badly at the audition, but won through on the basis of his acting alone.
Oh, so Eccleston's from like Manchester area. Okay.
Yeah, he's not a Londoner, so
yeah,
you know,
but that's not quite where. Yeah, that's still pretty far from Newcastle, though. That's like,
I mean, it's a well-known fact that Strong and Eccleston didn't get along on the show, and
which might have played into the advantage.
Outside of the scenes, the pair did not speak during filming, like literally offset. They didn't talk.
Yeah, that may have played into their advantage though, because they're supposed to not really like each other. So they're supposed to be like frenemies, you know.
This show was also the show that brought Daniel Craig to the attention of producer Barbara Broccoli, who would later cast him in James Bond. So this was actually the thing that she saw him in, and thought, yeah, maybe. And I think Mark Strong was also considered at one stage. And he was another person I think they also considered him for the role of M as well.
Well, he ended up being in Kingsman as which is
similar kind of
similar concept, but he was playing Merlin, who's kind of like Q, so. I like Mark Strong a lot, though. I always wanted a movie with him and Stanley Tucci. Just like, hey, we kind of look alike. Like, let's get them in the same.
Yeah. That playing brothers.
Yeah, it's like brothers who like were raised in like different countries or something.
Yeah. There's a few actors that are dead ringers for each other that I think it'd be interesting to do that with. The running time of the show in total is 623 minutes, so not quite yet the length of this stream. The original transmission was praised by critics across the board. Everybody lauding it with recognition and applause. At the British Academy Awards in 1997, it won the award for Best Drama Series, ahead of The Crow Road, The Fragile Heart, and Gulliver's Travels. Glad it beat Gulliver's Travels. GINA MCKEE won the Best Actress category. Both Christopher Eccleston and Peter Vaughan were nominated for Best Actor, but they both lost to Nigel Hawthorne. He's a brilliant actor.
I would figure that Peter Vaughan would have been up for supporting actor, but I don't know if that's a category or not. But
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how many lines of dialogue you have to list.
There's pretty long tracks of time where he's not in the show though, so I would think he would have been like
I mean he's in all the episodes. But Peter Vaughan also gained another Best Actor nomination for his role as Phoenix at the Broadcasting Press Awards, where it won Best Drama Series or Serial. Eccleston won Best Actor, McKee won Best Actress, and the Writers Award went to Peter Flannery in the USA, which I believe you're from.
Yes,
the
I am.
series was awarded the Certificate of Merit in the San Francisco International Film Festival of 1997. Nice. So
yeah, I have been told I'm from America. So
I believe that's true. Oh, Rennie's in the house. Lovely to see you.
Speaking of Americans, Rennie's here.
Speaking of Americans,
there is a rumor going around that she's married, by the way.
I've met the husband. I've met them both actually. So so this is the interesting thing. So following the success of the show, Flannery proposed a kind of prequel to be titled provisionally Our Friends in the South, which would have told the story of the Jarrow March. But eventually, even though the BBC were initially interested, the project fell apart. It didn't happen. The series has been repeated a number of times on TV. It's only been released on DVD, which is the set that I have here with the cool booklet. It's been compared to a number of other shows, and other shows have been inspired by it, including my own play, of course, Sticks and Stones, which actually I should try and get on this Wikipedia page.
There you go. If it's editable, then you could do it.
I mean, it's a true thing.
I'm saying if it's as long as it's not been locked, because I've been locked out of, when I was a teenager and decided that it was funny to just alter Wikipedia pages. I've been locked out before.
Oh dear. Well, now, so here's the other thing we were going to mention is, and I didn't know this until I was researching for this show. In February 22, Peter Flannery announced he'd revised and rewritten Our Friends in the North for BBC Radio 4 with a 10th episode.
Yes.
Set in Newcastle.
I just found this out earlier today, actually.
Yeah, set in Newcastle in 2020. So anyone who wants to have a listen to that, it's quite hard initially to tell who's who. And
yeah, because the voice actors were completely different.
Yeah, and also you've got new characters in it because you've got kids of people. This is 2020, so it's it's 5 years on from the last episode. But there's the link for it. I've just put it in the chat. People might want to check that out. I was planning on listening to that before this stream, but then my good friend Julie said, Lance, don't forget you're supposed to go dancing with me tonight, and that happened yesterday evening. Would you like? I
just found out. What?
Would you like to see a clip of me clubbing yesterday?
Sure. But I think that's the best way to end this stream, actually.
I mean, it's got to be done. I'll just see if I can get.
I don't think anything we could do. I think you should show the clip and then just hit stop, and that should just be the end. It's just like
no. I've got to give you a chance to comment, and I can't put it up. I can't share it here. I'm just going to literally have to hold up my.
That's fine.
Phone. There'll be a bit of music, but I don't think it'll be long enough to.
Nah, maybe. Sometimes like 3 or 4 seconds is enough, but whatever.
Well.
It's the end of it. It's,
So, I think is it this one? Yeah.
You look like you're having a good time. That's all I can say. I mean,
that's me in the DJ booth with Alex from.
There you go. I mean, hey, you're having a good time. You deserve a good time.
It was a good time, man. It was a good.
Yeah, your camera shifted a little bit there.
There we go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah.
No, that was a lot of fun. That was me going back to the 1980s yesterday. Yeah, Our Friends in the North. What would your final mark be for it?
I think it's pretty consistently in that 8 range that I've been giving it. There's some rough patches. Obviously it gets slightly downgraded for me because there are references I don't necessarily 100% understand. Sure. But it's solid acting, solid writing. Good, like the cinematography, whereas some of it a little dated, still by its standards of the time, really good. And it launched the careers of 3 guys that I've seen in a bunch of stuff. So it's but yeah. And I know you wanted to ask me about the theme. We kind of already touched that, but one theme that I think is that they were going for, if I had to pick one, it's don't let things pass you by. It's don't assume that you're going to be able to do something tomorrow. And I think that's the
song in the final episode as well is don't look back in anger. Remember?
Yeah, well, that's another thing. Like don't dwell on the past, live in the now as best you can, but also be aware that it does affect your future. That's the longer version of what I'm trying to say. But it don't assume that there's always a tomorrow, and that you get that from a lot of different subplots. So
I'm glad to see that you've already got my Christmas present. There's a big bottle of whiskey there on the shelf for me.
To be tequila and whiskey. So
shipped to the UK. Listen, man, thanks for coming on. It was a big commitment to do this stream on a topic that you weren't familiar with. I really appreciate it, but I think that's what makes it interesting.
Because I had fun with this one. It was when you first asked me about it, I was a little on the fence, but I was like, you know what? I kind of accidentally screwed you on the one stream. I'll commit to this one for you, and I've enjoyed it a lot. It's been and I feel like I've gotten a lot closer to you through this, which is awesome.
It's definitely true that one of the real benefits of running this YouTube channel is I have made some fantastic friends.
That's really in the end probably the coolest thing. I agree with you 100% that I've met a lot of people in places that I haven't met them physically yet. I plan to, but and you're on my list of people I'd like to meet in person, and but I have friends in countries all over the place now. Canada, Australia. It's cool. It's it's a really cool thing.
Well, I'm going to talk about some of the things that I've got coming up. So there's a couple more Best of British episodes happening this side of Christmas. There's going to be one on the Hillsborough film, which is actually, again, starring Christopher Eccleston, and the mini-series called Anne, which is about the late Anne Williams, which is also about Hillsborough. So we're going to talk about both of those, both very powerful dramas. Now, this is a really bizarre thing. So just last night, I was, you know how random thoughts suddenly come into your head, and I was thinking about, I want to look back on some of the early big miniseries of America as well. And I was thinking, Winds of War would be a good one to do because I've got that, and I've watched it recently, about 3-4 years ago, and then I remembered the really big one that was a huge event in the UK, and I've now learned worldwide, and that was James Clavell's Shogun with.
I saw this on your channel earlier.
And it's so weird because I thought, well, I wonder if it's available and where can I rewatch it? Because I was very young when I watched it. It was a huge television event. I remember that my parents let me stay up to watch it. It was shown on consecutive nights. And I think it had a like a universal release in America and UK at the same time, which is quite rare. Now, up to this point, there hadn't been a big television miniseries like this. This is the one that kickstarted them all. It was the success of Shogun that led to North and South being commissioned, which is another one that would be good to do. And I've also got that on DVD. But the Blu-ray of Shogun is a little bit pricey. Anyway, I went to kind of just have a search around, and I had no idea, it must have completely missed my radar, that Shogun has been remade, largely shot, I think there was between Japan and Canada, I believe. It's a co-production. Fantastic cast, with everything that modern technology allows for.
Yeah,
I think the new version of it looks absolutely fantastic. The trailer's out. You can see it now. So it's dropping in February. So I'm going to do an in-depth review of Shogun. I'm not going to do it episode by episode. I'll just do one stream on the whole thing. But I'm going to do that in January. I've already scheduled it. And then I think I'm doing it on a Friday night. And then on the Friday around the date that the show drops, and I don't think the date's locked in, but I think it's late February, I'm going to do an in-depth review of the updated one.
Nice.
So yeah, so that's going to be good. So they're going to be interesting to explore. It's going to be interesting to rewatch the old one, which had a profound effect on the way we see television now, the kind of programs that were made as a result, and how that led to other things being commissioned. If we hadn't have had Shogun and the success of Shogun, we wouldn't have had Band of Brothers. It would have probably taken another 10 years before we'd got Band of Brothers. So it had a profound effect on TV. I don't think the show's aged entirely well, but apparently the Blu-ray print of it is pretty good, the quality. So, and I mean, Richard Chamberlain hams it up a bit. I do remember his performance in it as being satisfactory. I don't know that it's gonna
not necessarily good, but not bad either. So
James Clavell was annoyed at his casting. He wanted Sean Connery, but he was extremely happy with his performance. So Richard Chamberlain's always struck me as quite a Mr. Dr. Kildare. He's always struck me as quite a nice bloke. I don't know. I haven't worked with him, but I think if he
sometimes you can just tell a person seems like a
it's an actor that strikes me as okay. I'm going to do the best that I can in this particular thing. And funnily enough, I had a conversation with Drinker about this, and as soon as I mentioned Shogun, he was like, oh my God, yeah, like that was the book because it was a big meaty book as well. And you used to see it at car boot sales absolutely everywhere because everybody had a copy at some stage. And he said he remembered that book. So maybe it even influenced him as a writer. Who knows? So what do you got coming up? You got you're booked through till 35.
I'm booked to my death at this point. So
may that be long in coming.
But the most up and coming one is I have dodgeball prepared to dodge, duck, dive, and dodge.
You told me you were doing dodgeball.
Oh yeah, that one.
That one's actually on dodgeball.
Oh, well, I'll put you down as an alternate just in case something happens.
Yeah, if someone drops out, let me know. When is dodgeball happening?
The 11th. And so I actually contacted a while back. I got a hold of a former pro dodgeball player who was a member of the U.S. dodgeball team, and I wanted to do a stream with him about it. And I'm finally going to have him on, as well as Stupenzo, who was on your channel recently, and Zax. Nice. Yeah. And obviously the Uninspired Reviewer. And other than that, though, I just have my my Marvels review. I'm already working on that. I'm already doing a lot of the graphics and the like thumbnails and all that stuff for that. And hopefully get that out in a timely fashion when that movie comes out, and maybe even beat some of the pros to it for a change. But yeah, that's pretty much what I got coming out in the next week or two. So.
Fab stuff. Well, I'm sure it's all going to go strength for strength for us little guys. I've got to get Uninspired on here actually at some point.
We could maybe do it. Maybe me and him could do a 2-hose invasion of your channel.
Yeah,
me and him generally don't do stuff on channels outside of our stuff together. It's kind of like a running gag that you never see us both in anywhere together besides the channel. So
it could be that you're actually replicating his voice, and he's an AI.
He has a very unique accent that I couldn't.
He does have a very unique. I think you'd be quite hard pushed to.
He's got an African influenced French accent, so I can't really do that. So.
Right. Well, anyway, let us. We'll wrap up there. Thanks ever so much for popping in. Thanks to the people that have popped in. I know this is quite a niche topic, but it is a show that's worth your time. I'm probably going to be back on again tomorrow. I think I might come back on and do a bit of a gaming stream with my my game books. I'm also designing a game book. That's my big project for 2024. Nice. I've got 2 big book projects that I'm going to have out before the end of 2024. One is the Book of the Tweet, which is a completely fictional story about the firing of an actress from a science fiction television show. The name of the actress is called Nina Serrano. As I say, it's entirely fictional. Originally, this was going to be done as I've already done a fair bit of work on it, because originally it was going to be a play, and we were going to the lockdown. We didn't know when lockdown was going to end, and if you look at the original stuff on the channel, it was live streams of performances. That's what we were doing as the Outcast, until it metamorphosized into the sort of my entertainment channel. But this is the poster. And the cover of the book is going to be pretty much exactly the same as of that. It's going to be that same logo. I
wonder what this could possibly be influenced by.
Well, I'm going to really take media to task with the silliness of everything. I'm going to take no prisoners, and there's going to be characters based on absolutely everybody in the book. So there's a character in it called the Scotsman. There's all.
I wonder who that might be.
Yeah, I mean, who knows?
You have total permission to come up with somebody named like Light Minute or something if you want. Yeah. Go ahead, have fun with it.
Got geek erotic and wasted R2. There's all kinds of fictional characters in the show, in the book, in the fictional book that's not based on anyone. So yeah, and I've just started putting the word out that it's going to be out, because I the good thing is if I keep putting the word out, it'll put me under pressure to finish it. So it'll light a creative fire under my arse, and actually my fire has been missing. So because I lost my muse, so I have to reignite it. So that kind of pressure is good for me. And the other one is going to be my game book, adventure game book. It's going to be a World War II adventure game book, and no one's ever done one of those before.
Nice.
And I'm going to do one based on a real battle from history. So you'll actually be segueing with real moments of history, and maybe you'll change them. So that's going to be quite cool. And if that book is successful, I'm going to do a whole series of them. So yeah, so I know what I'm doing with my 2024. You know, waste no time. All right, so that's it from us. Thanks ever so much, Dark Hour. Always love having you on the show. I don't know if we can let the pink shirt come again, but you know.
Oh, come on! I love this shirt.
I'll send you a Tire Rules.
Oh,
I'm completely color coordinated. I've got the mint green Outcast hoodie on today.
I mean, you can always send me an Outcast Creative. I'll wear an Outcast Creative shirt.
Well, do you know, I'm gonna when I've got enough subscribers, I'm gonna do some Outcast merch.
Cool.
But I might have a. There's one member of the Outcast who ordered a hoodie and they didn't get it because the wrong number turned up or something. Okay. So when I do another batch, I've got to sort that out for them.
Yeah, I'll wear one on your streams. Oh
man,
I wear Mr. Brown Alliance shirt all the time. I got one from him too. So.
I didn't know he was doing shirts.
Yeah, he's got a few shirts. Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to grab one of those. I've got a retro nerd girl shirt, and I've got like God knows how many drunk 3PO caps.
Yeah, I don't have merch yet. Eventually, one day.
Yeah, one day. All right, man. Thanks, everybody. We will see you all again real soon. Okay.